Till we are document, if you have the document, if any questions, we can start with that. Questions तभी आएंगे ना जब पढ़ा होगा. So the first question is, have you read it? और जिसने पढ़ा होगा उनके पास सवाल होंगे, है ना, क्योंकि पढ़ते पढ़ते कहीं ना कहीं अटके होंगे या दिमाग में कुछ आया होगा. So are there any questions from the document? चलो कोई नहीं. We'll start by looking at the document once it is set. Okay, so we are all with the document. Expected that you would be reading it. If you read it, you will find the doubts, and that makes the process faster. So till the last class, we had done some basic things, and in terms of content also, we had covered China and Pakistan related developments. And within those developments, we talked about issues like borders, we talked about water issues or rivers, right? So we tried to do it as comprehensively as possible, so that first you have a sense of the examination, plus you also have a sense of the content. So since you don't have any question, let's start with questions which you should be able to answer if you have looked at the document, all right? So yesterday we had seen a lot of questions. Now today, let's start with some of the questions which you could answer through the document. Okay, so I told you that, you know, there are certain rules which are mentioned in the infographic. You read it. So you see, this is where the differentiation starts. Those of you who found the time to read it actually did the work which you should have done. Those of you who did not read it for any reason, you made that work pending, all right? And this is how backlog is created in UPSC preparation, right? So that is also part of the preparation. Now read this question. And that is based on the kind of information which is mentioned very clearly in the document. And by solving the question also, you will be able to learn. Is it visible to everyone? दिख नहीं रहा? चश्मा लगाते हैं? चश्मा लगाने के बाद भी नहीं दिख रहा? चलो अपना डॉक्यूमेंट खोलो. डॉक्यूमेंट पे ये कहाँ पे मिलेगा वो देखो. आपके लिए ये क्वेश्चन पढ़ दूंगा. ऑल राइट. चलो, जिनको पढ़ने में आ रहा हो, स्क्रीन पे दिखाई दे रहा हो, वो वहां से देख लो. जिन्होंने वो डॉक्यूमेंट खोल लिया वो वहां से देख लो. क्वेश्चन इज, कंसिडर द फॉलोइंग पेयर्स. इट इज अबाउट रूल्स और कन्वेंशंस एंड द प्रिंसिपल्स, प्राइमरी प्रिंसिपल्स which are associated with them, or what are these rules or principles or conventions about. One is the Harman Doctrine. It dates back to 1895. All right. So Judson Harman was the Attorney General of US, and in the matter of Rio Grande, which is a river shared between Mexico and US, he clearly opined that when it comes to resources inside a territory, a state has absolute sovereignty. So that's one extreme idea of how natural sources like transboundary rivers should be mentioned. All right, Helsinki Rules 1966. Now these rules are developed by the experts in international law, right? Or bodies like International Law Association. These are by no means treaties. They are suggestions that if you want to legally share resources or manage joint resources in terms of transboundary rivers, then you can apply these principles. So the Helsinki Rules, which dates back to 1966, and you can correct it in your document also. If it is mentioned 1996, it is 1966, right? So it is a document which contains a lot of things, but principle that it emphasizes upon, if you could read this, set of principles setting the basis of international law regarding the equitable allocation. Equitable allocation is the key term, and use of international rivers, all right? So that is something that is associated with the Helsinki Rules, which is another layer of development of international law when it comes to governing water relations, all right? Then there is Campion Rule, which is mentioned there. So it is actually called Campion consolidation of these rules. So various rules, various generation of rules are consolidated through these series of documents 1966 to 1999. And here Campion rule, the addition is in this phase of development of this kind of law, the addition is that Campion rule talks about need to include water of an aquifer, fossil water, underground water, when one is thinking about or when one is trying to manage these resources by applying the principle of equitable and reasonable share. All right. So ये आता है Campion rule से. उसके बाद Berlin rules. Now Berlin rules is the latest iteration. So basic rules like the Helsinki rules. Now the addition here is management of water of an international drainage basin having due regard to for the obligation to not cause significant harm to the other basin state. Right? So meaning it says that when you are managing these resources, equitable reasonable distribution are principles. Another principle that while managing these resources, you should keep in mind that you uphold the principle of not causing harm, or in this case causing minimum harm to the interest of the other riparian state जिसके साथ आप river share कर रहे हैं. All right, and then sort of all these principles and in a sense development of this law further is codified in a convention which is often called UN Waterway Conventions. All right, the name of the convention is the Convention on the Law of Non-Navigational Use of International Water Course, or the UN Water Courses Convention 1997. So this is another convention which may provide a legal basis if countries want to or decide to do so, legal basis of managing their resources. All right, so what is it that is contained here? As the name suggests, it is about the non-navigational usage. All right, navigation is when you use river systems for transport. All right, movement of goods, movement of passengers. So non-navigational use may mean the drinking water use, agricultural use, etc. So in that context, in those contexts, what legal principles should be applied and what protections are there available for the rights of involved countries, that is contained in this particular convention. All right. So basically, it's for those who have some understanding of law. If you want to make arguments, you strengthen your arguments by pointing out at this. These rules do not have a legal force per se in themselves unless they are codified in the national laws of countries, because primarily it would be governed by national laws, issue of resources, etc. Unless we are talking about global commons, resources which are beyond sovereign claim of any country, like space, outer space, or like high sea, all right, deeper part of the sea, or like the atmosphere. These are global commons, or like the Antarctica. These are global commons. But apart from that, if you are talking about resources, it would primarily be governed by what the sovereigns decide. If the sovereigns decide to do it peacefully, these principles are available to them. If the sovereigns decide to do it by a separate instrument like Indus Water Treaty, that is also something that they can do. They are developing their own legal instruments. समझ में आई ये बात? All right? तो ये इस तरह का क्वेश्चन है. अगर कोई कॉम्प्लिकेटेड क्वेश्चन दिखता है यूपीएससी का तो ऐसा दिखता है. He's talking about don't become an expert, just know when these rules came into existence and what are they about, what is the main emphasis. All right, वहाँ कोई आपसे कानूनी मुकदमा लड़ने के लिए नहीं कह रहा है कि put in place India's position on this. So that is not your rule. While reading things like that, often this is the approach that you adopt, and that is why you start finding things different. All right, तो ये आपने पढ़ा होता, डॉक्यूमेंट में आपको मिला, कुछ करेक्शंस मुझे सजेस्ट करने थे जो मैंने कर दिया आपको, जैसे कि हेलसिंकी रूल 1966. रेस्ट इज रिटन देयर. ऑल राइट, and all of these pairs, for the purpose of learning, all of these pairs are correctly matched, right? So now let's move forward to the next one, right? If you have read it, the next part was a box on water resource cooperation, which is every year as it is in the PT365 document. If you're reading any of the basic relations like India, Pakistan, India, Nepal, India, China, India, Bangladesh, water is an important issue. Transboundary rivers and their management is an important issue. All right, for flood management, disaster relief, or for agriculture, or for power production, or for navigation, these are various uses of these waters. So thereby, the relations between countries are governed legally by treaties or agreements. All right, terms are used coterminously, interchangeably. Agreement is a very general term. Treaty generally gives the idea that it has been signed between two legally empowered entities, and these two legally empowered entities are states. All right, so states sign treaties, right? So if you go into technicalities, would be a lot of exceptions which would apply, but in general we say that it is not the title of the document which has any meaning, it is the content of the document which has a meaning. So understand, treaty, agreement are coterminous. All right, so then if you see, there are various treaties that you will find in each relation very prominently. तो अगर पढ़ा होगा, किसी भी तरीके से पढ़ा होगा, तो इस तरह के क्वेश्चन का आंसर कर दोगे. इसके लिए अलग से तैयारी करने की जरूरत नहीं है. क्या क्वेश्चन है? सेलेक्ट द करेक्ट क्रोनोलॉजिकल ऑर्डर, मीनिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ द ईयर्स टू लास्ट. कौन सी ट्रीटी कब आई? तो ये चार ऑप्शन आपके सामने है. द कंटेंट वाज देयर with you, and I told you the best way to utilize this kind of content is try to think in terms of questions. Quiz is available to you, है ना? आपके पास डॉक्यूमेंट के साथ क्विज भी अवेलेबल है. मार्केट में भी बहुत सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैं, यूपीएससी के भी पेपर हैं. You can also make your questions. All right, so that is your application. So now what is the correct answer? What is the correct answer? C, D बहुत सारे लोग कह रहे हैं. तो बहुत सिंपल है. कुछ ट्रीटीज के बारे में आप जानते होंगे, राइट? सो इन दीज काइंड्स ऑफ क्वेश्चंस either you know the complete information or you know partial information. Both can help you in answering this question. At least you should have put in some effort. ये कोई टैलेंट से आंसर करने वाला तो क्वेश्चन है नहीं. बहुत सारे लोग टैलेंट भी रिले करके ये एग्जाम देते हैं क्योंकि ज़िंदगी में बड़े अच्छे रहे हैं वो पढ़ने में, तो उनको लगता है कि नहीं यहाँ ऐसा नहीं चलेगा. थोड़ा भी पढ़ा है तो वो आपके काम आएगा. ऑल राइट, सो दैट is where you should have correctly answered it, पर फिर भी CD लोग कर रहे हैं. So now see, it's very simple. The Kosi agreement was signed in 1954, which is there in the document. The Gandak agreement with Nepal, Kosi Gandak, इतना तो पता ही होगा ना कि ये rivers कहाँ से आती हैं. So this was signed in 1959 and both these agreements were subsequently renewed. All right, then you have the Indus Water Treaty 1960 with Pakistan. Then you have the Mahakali Treaty with Nepal, all right, on the river Mahakali and related developments, project developments, right? So again, either you learn by answering the question or you learn by reading the document, thereby making your own addition also. So अपने document अपने साथ रखे, and wherever you find interesting information or additional information, please note it down. Wherever I would remember it, I will definitely let you know. Right, now this is the question on Indus Water Treaty. A simple question. We had seen UPSC question, we had answered other questions also. So again, जाके आपको दोबारा एक बार पढ़ना था. All right, the Indus Water Treaty was signed in the year 1960 between India and Pakistan concerning the use of waters of Indus system of rivers. The treaty extends to main rivers of Indus basin, that is Satluj, Bias, Ravi, which are eastern rivers, Jhelum, Chenab and Indus, which are western rivers, including their tributaries and sub-tributaries and other water bodies. And the third is, all the waters of the eastern rivers were allocated to India for her unrestricted use, while India is under obligation to let flow all the waters of the western rivers except for the domestic, non-consumptive and other uses permitted in the treaty. So यहाँ पे भी मुश्किल तो नहीं होनी चाहिए आपको इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर करने में. If you have read it correctly, what is the answer? All of the statements are correct. So again, you can visualize any information, different kind of questions. Let's move forward, right? Let's add. जो नहीं है वो add कर देते हैं. So what about China? How do we manage water relations with China? That is also mentioned in the document, by the way. I'm just adding something and basically re-emphasizing it so that I don't have to go to the document. So if you see, first of all, ये basic geography और IR combine हो जाता है इस तरह के topics में, right? So basic geography के लिए मैंने कहा था, यहाँ भी मैंने आपको याद कराने के लिए लिखा हुआ है. I've written it. Link these kinds of topics with geography and your NCERT reading. That is your value addition. Nobody will tell you कि ये करो, but paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, paper 4. I'm talking about mains. If you can bring interlinkages in your answer writing, your answer would stand out as comparison to other people. Right? Similarly, there is no difference in preparing for PT and mains examination is proven by these kinds of topics. Right? Because geography is here, Economic aspects would be there, political aspects are there, international relation is here, right? So when you are making notes, your notes should not be restricted to, you know, only being subject specific. Sooner or later your notes should basically give ideas of how to quickly implement your learning. Notes अंत में इस बारे में होने चाहिए, right? बहुत छोटे और they should be valuable, मतलब एक पेज का की वैल्यू होनी चाहिए 20 पेज के बराबर, and that comes through process, right? लगे रहोगे अपने काम में तब होता है ये, right? So let's look at it. Two river systems. One is Brahmaputra river system, of course, purely in geography. You read it in the drainage system in India. Now, Brahmaputra's main stream is Siang, that is basic geography, all right, or India's geography. So this is the main stream, and its tributaries are Subansiri, Lohit, right? इतना आप geography पढ़ के जानते हैं. And called Yarlung Zambo in China or in Tibet, all right? Now, how do we manage our relations? So we understand that India is a lower riparian, China is a upper riparian, because both these rivers originate in China, Brahmaputra as well as Indus, and some of the tributaries of Indus like Satluj. All right, so that is the second river system, right? So in 2002, Government of India and Government of China entered into a short-term agreement, limited agreement. Generally, MOUs are signed for limited purpose. Either there is time limitation, or it is addressing, it's an agreement which is addressing a very narrow part of some area of cooperation. All right, so we think that MOUs have less of a legal value, right? But again, MOU, treaty, document के title में, it doesn't matter. What matters is the content. It is true for any legal document. Don't read it by the title. All right. Now we signed an MOU for what? For hydrological information sharing, hydrological data sharing. For which period? During flood season. So it's a limited agreement for limited purpose, hydrological data sharing, and that too during flood season, so that lower riparian can prepare well to combat flood. What is this season? 15th May to 15th October. So in all the water treaties, there would be a conception of either monsoon period or generally lean season. So these are defined by agricultural season in India. अगर आपको यही नहीं पता agricultural season India में क्या है, तो आपको मुश्किल होगी ये समझने में, जबकि बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है. All right. These MOUs are for 5 years, and they are 2008, 2013, they have been renewed on Brahmaputra. All right, 2023. Now this MOU would expire. Let's see whether it is renewed and when it is renewed. Now in 2013, both of them signed a larger memorandum of understanding MOU for strengthening cooperation on trans-border rivers. So these kinds of agreements generally don't contain specifics. They are broadly about the intent. They are declaring, both sides are declaring the intent to cooperate more on trans-border rivers. All right, and some addition, meaning from to the previous agreement, now we are adding data from some more hydrological station. All right, so ye hai, so mainly MOUs. And then a second MOU for Satluj. Satluj is known as Langen Zangbo in Tibetan or in China. All right, so on that also we have an MOU for hydrological data sharing for the monsoon period or for the flood season, right? Now the MOU on Satluj has been renewed till 2020. It was first signed in 2010, 15 renewal ho gaya, and then 2020 expire ho gaya, iska renewal baki hai, its renewal is pending, right? So these are the mechanisms of cooperation when it comes to water between India and China, fairly low and limited level of cooperation. The body where the dialogue is sustained on this issue between India and China is at the level of experts. It is called expert level mechanism. All right. See, expert level mechanism was established in 2006. So this is a body of experts, meaning in a government you would have secretary level officials, but you would have also departments like CPWD or BRO where you have experts, engineers, right? Hydrological experts. So experts के level पे बातचीत होती है, expert level mechanism. In expert level mechanism talks have taken place so far. ठीक है? This is about China. तो ये अगर आप ऐड कर पाएंगे तो आपका ये जो क्वेश्चन होता है ना कि इतना काफी है क्या? काफी अगर आप तैयारी करने चाहे तो काफी का सवाल उठता ही नहीं है, राइट? सो फर्स्ट कवर द बेसिक टेक्स्ट, देन try and add on to the information. All right, ये आपको very clearly cut out. Now, how many meetings of Permanent Indus Commission have taken place so far? 118. Last one in May 2022. Now, moving forward, if you have read the document, you will find that on some of the projects, Pakistan raises objections, and these projects, which have been talked about in recent times, are on the tributaries of Chenab River. So, if UPSC asks a question, which of the following are tributaries of Chenab River, we will consider that question to be inspired by international relations. All right, it has an international relations link because this is a river basin which is covered by a treaty between India and Pakistan. Right. So, Pakaldal, Kiru, Lower Kalnai, Ratal, all projects and all names of tributaries of the Indus. All right. So, I am only giving you an example. If you want to do your value addition, how much you can do, right? And also I am expressing my limitation that if I keep on doing value addition only, I would need some 10-15 classes, right? So, some of your effort, and of course I am here to guide you in what direction you should move. तो अपना एफर्ट लगाने का मतलब ये होता है कि मैंने कहा पढ़ के आइए तो पढ़ के आइए. ऑल राइट, चलिए आगे चलते हैं. लेट्स मूव फॉरवर्ड. No, not at all. I'm not here for spoon feeding. I'm only showing you questions and where the need to be to make additions. I'm doing it. ये डॉक्यूमेंट है आपके पास. यूपीएससी की सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम यही है कि आप इकट्ठा करने में लग जाते हैं, है ना. इकट्ठा करने का मतलब ये होता है कि वो कभी नहीं पढ़ा जाता, तो अभी कर लो. इसीलिए मैंने कहा पढ़ के आओ तो एडिशन अपने आप में बहुत ज़्यादा समझ में आने लगेगी. राइट, चलिए. कोई पॉपुलैरिटी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में तो मैं हूँ नहीं कि मैं कहूँ नहीं बिल्कुल बेटा जो कहोगे वो मैं करूँगा. आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू डू दैट. चलो सी दिस क्वेश्चन. बांग्लादेश पे आ जाते हैं आप कंटेंट वाइज. राइट, सो व्हाट इज देयर इन बांग्लादेश कंटेंट? व्हाट डू यू फाइंड इन बांग्लादेश कंटेंट? फर्स्ट, व्हेन यू आर studying to any relationship, there are two things that you should do. One, you should have a very brief idea about the nature of the relationship. A lot of people are interested in the history of the relationship. क्लास में आओ हिस्ट्री जाननी है. पेपर IR का है, पेपर हिस्ट्री का नहीं है. दिस इज नॉट अ पेपर ऑफ हिस्ट्री. ऑल राइट, सो हिस्टोरिकल रीडिंग इधर यू डू इट थ्रू डॉक्यूमेंट्स एंड देन यू बिकम अप टू डेट विद द करंट कंटेंट. तो IR के हिसाब से किसी भी रिलेशनशिप के नेचर के बारे में आपको आइडिया होना चाहिए. व्हाट इज द नेचर ऑफ दिस रिलेशन? All right, it is expressed in some phrases which you will find in official documents. All right, second thing is you simply know that interaction between countries is interest based. So what are the areas of interest? What are the areas of engagement between any country? Actually, you will find it is classified in areas like political and diplomatic engagements, meaning meetings, visits, agreements signed between countries. Secondly, you have the economic content of a relationship, which basically is the basic simple trade data. All right, and simple trade analysis, for example trade deficit like data. पढ़ा होगा तो आपको दिखा होगा content ऐसा ही है. Right, now thirdly you have areas, river waters for example in the case of India's neighbors. All right, or connectivity, what are we doing in terms of connecting better with each other, right? Or cultural cooperation, cultural relations, right? And then there is defense strategic component of any relationship. These are areas of engagement. So here and its analysis at the exam level is based on these two things. Are you aware of the nature of relationship, and thereby are you aware of the areas of engagement, mechanisms, some numbers about that? This is the data for the examination, which is not a terribly difficult data to have about every relationship, right? So now the story of India-Bangladesh relations. India-Bangladesh celebrated 50 years of their foundation in 2022. This was marked by Prime Minister Modi's visit to Bangladesh in March 2022, and then later on 6 December 2022 to celebrate Maitri Divas, which is what these two countries have designated 6 December to be. The President of India visited Bangladesh. So we say that with Bangladesh we have a relationship of fraternal friendship, brotherly friendship that we have, sisterly if you have gender concerns, fraternal friendship, but official documents use these terms. Then we also know that over the last few years the sentiment is that India-Bangladesh relation is passing through a golden phase or golden chapter or Sonali Adhyay. That is the nature of the relationship. We know that diplomatically this relationship has been sustained by a close relationship since the founding, because India played a special role in the formation of Bangladesh. Friendship is founding diplomatic document of this relation, right? And then this visit, this marked by frequent top level visits. So that's why it is covered in terms of Prime Minister's visit to Bangladesh or Bangladesh's Prime Minister's visit to India. So all these measures show us that this relationship is pretty strong. Now what are the areas of engagement? So we say that this relationship is witnessing a golden chapter because we have made progress in resolving contentious issues, and we have made progress in areas of cooperation, plus we have added to the areas of cooperation, newer areas of cooperation. What are these? So when we look at the issues which we have resolved, 2015 with the ratification and final implementation of the land boundary agreement, which was originally signed in 1974, we resolved the issue of our land border. All right. Second, 2014 through arbitration under UNCLOS, we were able to settle our maritime boundaries peacefully. All right, so this is resolution of some of the difficult issues. 2014 maritime boundary demarcation between India and Bangladesh through the process of arbitration. All right. Now, if you see going beyond this, what has happened is this has allowed a cooperation to progress in many areas like trade and connectivity. All right, but this has been built on years of negotiations, plus the fact that 2008 onwards, Bangladesh continuously had Awami power and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina power. So then if you see going beyond that, the economic content of this relationship A is highlighted by the fact that Bangladesh is India's largest trading partner in South Asia, and the trade with Bangladesh in fact is larger than many of the larger economies, right? 18 billion US dollars mark has been crossed. 2018 we had crossed 10 billion for the first time, right? And generally, you see, in all these trades with our neighbors, we have a trade surplus, all right? Overwhelming trade surplus with all our neighbors. So, for example, Bangladesh's exports would be around 1 to 2 billion. India's exports are around 16 billion. So, this gives you an idea that it is a proximate important market for India's exports, all right? So, that's why Bangladesh is important. Now, secondly, if you see, trade has expanded on the basis of certain special measures. For example, India provides favorable market access, duty-free market access to 98% of imports from Bangladesh, because Bangladesh was a least developed country. All right. Now, if you see in this relationship, thereby we see progress. We see that India's interests are upheld. Second thing is the economic engagements are also in terms of investments, and primarily through development support or development assistance to Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is the largest recipient of lines of credit offered by India. Lines of credit are soft loans, all right? Soft loans because they are low interest rate and long gestation period loans. So these are development instrument. It's a loan that India provides to other countries, developing and least developed countries, countries of the south, for development projects of their choice. So 8 billion US dollars of line of credit allocated to Bangladesh in this last decade. And then if you also see Bangladesh and India cooperation in this development area translates into, right? We said we solved border, economic content of relationship is good. We also have development cooperation. So now it is translating into other areas, transformative areas of cooperation. What are these? Connectivity. Connectivity is about expediting movement of goods, movement of people, movement of ideas. So any means of transport which expedite the movement of these, we club them under connectivity projects, right? It involves infrastructure spending. So thereby you will see India and Bangladesh have taken up connectivity projects. So they have an inland water connectivity cooperation ongoing based on a protocol on inland water trade and transit signed in 1972. That is the agreement that they had signed, basically establishing the rules. How do we use rivers for better transport, efficient transport? All right. And then what you will see is within this protocol in recent years, newer routes have been identified on the rivers. So basically Ganges basin and Brahmaputra basin, and what is the third basin? The Meghna basin, GBM. Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna is the shared basin between India and Bangladesh. So one idea is inland water transport connectivity. Second idea, prior to 1965, the railway networks covering India, Bangladesh, what is today's Bangladesh, and Pakistan were functional. Over the years, these networks have fallen in disuse, right? Because the railway network majorly in India was laid down by the Britishers. So now the attempt is to revive these rail connects. This is by improving the infrastructure. So that's why you will see examples like Akhora Agartala rail line, right? Similarly, what you will see is that this connectivity also extends to maritime connectivity. After we have resolved our maritime boundary issue, cooperation in maritime area has become easier. So there you will see we have a maritime agreement or coastal shipping agreement dating back to 2016. And then this is about coast to coast shipping for India and Bangladesh. We are now considering to add third party trade to this. All right, so we have coastal shipping agreement for us, port to port transport, and then you have the use of Bangladeshi ports for transshipment, meaning you carry goods through the ocean to a port and then you offload the goods at the port and then you use other means. It can be internal waterways or roads or railways to carry the goods to its final destination, which is the states of Northeast. All right, so for transshipment, we have agreement for using the Mongla port and the Chittagong or Chattogram port of Bangladesh. All right, now these are some of the very important projects which would transform India-Bangladesh relations. Their trade or connectivity of Northeast or connectivity between South Asia, Southeast Asia, or sub-regional connectivity within BBIN, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Bhutan project in this subcontinent, right? So these are connectivity projects. Bus services are there between India and Bangladesh. Railway services are there between India and Bangladesh. Maitri, Bandhan, right? These are rail services between India and Bangladesh. So that's why we say that this is a new area, emerging area and transformative area of cooperation. Then a perennial area of cooperation which requires consistent management is water resources. As I said, GBM basin, world's second largest hydrological region as far as discharge of water is concerned, fresh water is concerned, after Amazon, is the GBM basin. Now GBM basin is a transboundary basin, meaning the river comprising it are flowing through different countries. All right. So if you see, Ganges has tributaries coming from Nepal also. Brahmaputra has tributaries coming from Bhutan also. Right. Brahmaputra originates in China, flows through India, and then goes into Bangladesh. So if you could see, if you imagine the idea of a basin, it could be a vast terrain or domain, right? But GBM basin for specific management, first of all, the river management in this part of South Asia was weak, because when it comes to the earlier agreements, Indus Water Treaty covered relations with West Pakistan, right? Indus is a river pertinent for West Pakistan. So that was the priority when Bangladesh was part of Pakistan. So this region was ignored. Bangladesh became independent. We established what is called Joint Rivers Commission in 1972, because we already had an idea that this can be a contentious issue in otherwise good relations. So the Joint Rivers Commission as the official body to look into these issues and suggest proposals to what to do. Farakka related differences arose between India and Bangladesh early on. We signed an agreement for 10 years called the Farakka Accord in 1977. Finally, we finalized a larger agreement called the Ganges Water Treaty in 1996, which basically is about sharing of water from Farakka, the last transit point in India, last water structure in India, to Bangladesh in the lean season, and the measurement is every 10 days. All right. So, ये 1996 में Ganges Water Agreement we signed with Bangladesh, which is an agreement which is for 30 years, meaning it is going to expire in 2026. But we generally say that it is satisfactorily working. All right. India and Bangladesh have 54 transboundary rivers, and each of them require better management. But particularly these larger rivers, Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Barak, which later is known as Meghna in Bangladesh. All right. So Ganges becomes Padma, Brahmaputra becomes Jamuna. They join together, they flow as Padma, and then ultimately this stream is joined by Meghna, which is basically Barak River, the main stream, and other streams joining. And then when these three rivers meet, the last stream is also known as Meghna. But then it is a, if you see on the map, it's basically a large deltaic area, right? So this is an important area of cooperation. The details of it is something that I talked about, right? Economic content or other contents I have already talked about. So thereby, now you can answer this question. If you look at this question, all right? Consider the following about Ganga-Ganges water sharing treaty. It was signed with Bangladesh in the year 1996 for sharing of Ganga-Ganges water at Farakka. As per the treaty, the Ganga-Ganges waters is being shared at Farakka, which is the last control structure on river Ganga in India. Sharing is during lean period. What is lean period? Pre-monsoon period. All right. So this is basically 1st January to 31st May. Now, if you have applied yourself to your studies, you know the agricultural season in the subcontinent. All right, Rabi, Kharif, right? These kinds of seasons. So यहाँ पे आपको दिख रहा है कि river water sharing में primary जो concern है availability of water at the right time, availability of information at the right time, right? Some agreements about information, some agreements are more comprehensive like Indus Water Treaty, some agreements are more about sharing of water, meaning deciding the quantum of sharing, right? So not all water agreements are water sharing agreement, right? So which of the above is correct? Of course, for the purpose of learning, all of this is correct, right? So these kinds of questions have been asked by UPSC, right? For example, on Teesta, I did not talk about Teesta because Teesta related question has already been asked by UPSC in the year 2018 in the preliminary examination. ठीक है, अब ये क्वेश्चन देखो यूपीएससी ने, what kind of question is this, what type of question is this, what type of question, yesterday we had talked about, what area of question is this? So basically it's a relation based question. देखो ये टर्मिनोलॉजी क्यों जरूरी है, बिकॉज जब तक ये तुमको पता ही नहीं कि तुम कर क्या रहे हो तो तुम केवल पढ़ते रहोगे. So that's why we develop these terms, right? That areas of questions, types of question, right? So that you first have a word to describe what you are addressing. बहुत बार हमारे पास ये word ही नहीं होता, जैसे feeling describe करने को कहो, right? So for the longest time I knew there are two kinds of feelings. One is anger, another is happiness. बीच में और क्या होता है? Then you realize that language has been devised by human beings to classify information. तो जब इस वो काम ही आप नहीं कर पा रहे हो इनिशियल लेवल पे तो आगे भी मुश्किल होगी, इसलिए यूपीएससी प्रिपरेशन के साथ ये सारी स्किल्स आप सीख जाते हैं, राइट? तो इसका आंसर क्या है जरा देखो, कोशिश करो. कॉमन सेंसिकल क्वेश्चन था ये. यूपीएससी जनरली डज नॉट आस्क दीज काइंड्स ऑफ क्वेश्चंस, बट if it has appeared, so we consider it also. B is 2 only, right? So let's see, consider the options. The value of Indo-Sri Lanka trade has consistently increased in the last decade. Last decade has not been about consistent increase in anything. The best economic decade for India was 2000s. Perhaps, in my opinion, that was not politically the best decade, but economically the best decade in terms of indicators, right? And generally, you don't see consistent increase or decrease in trade, right? Consistent. So, बहुत सारे कारणों से, क्योंकि ये वेग है, all right? कोई specific value attached नहीं है इसके साथ. So, very common sensically, we can say that this is not correct. Textile and textile articles constitute an important item of trade between India and Bangladesh. If you read documents like Economic Survey, if you read about India-Bangladesh relations, every newspaper article or even these kinds of sources would tell you what is it that we sell, what is it that we export. So if you see, Bangladesh is known for textile exports, all right? Even if you don't know anything about Bangladesh economy, you know two things. One, it's an agrarian economy, all right? Two, its manufacturing sector is known for textile products, ready-made garments, all right? So, ये आपको इंडिया के बारे में भी पता होना चाहिए. What are the top 3-4 products that we have, right? Refined petroleum, gems and jewelry, right? तो और textiles, इस तरह की चीज़ें हम बहुत ज़्यादा बेचते हैं. तो ये थोड़ा थोड़ा आइडिया अपने आप प्रिपरेशन के साथ होने लगता है. You start developing this idea, right? And depending on who you are, either you will use it to show off your knowledge to others, or you will use it to present an informed answer in the right context. Right context है मेंस में आंसर लिखना और पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट में आंसर का जवाब देना और पीटी में आंसर को सही करना। इसके अलावा कहीं भी जो भी आप कर रहे हैं, इट्स जस्ट पैसेज ऑफ टाइम, आप टाइम पास कर रहे हैं, ठीक है। तो इसका दूसरा देखो, ये कॉमन सेंसिकल था। तीसरा, इन द लास्ट 5 years, जब मैं कहता हूं ना यूपीएससी इज अबाउट पैटर्न्स, पहला पॉइंट पैटर्न, राइट। लास्ट डिकेड हैज कंसिस्टेंटली इंक्रीज और डिक्रीज, दिस इज पैटर्न। इट इज नॉट आस्किंग यू द डेसिमल वैल्यू ऑफ ट्रेड या इस साल कितना ट्रेड था। तो यूपीएससी का सेंस लगने के लिए क्वेश्चंस काफी हैं। इन द लास्ट 5 years, Nepal has been the largest trading partner of India in South Asia. While talking simply, I said Bangladesh is India's largest trading partner. I said 2018, we had crossed the number of 10 billion. Then Bangladesh was also India's largest trading partner, and consistently Bangladesh has been India's largest trading partner in South Asia. All right, commonsensical. So thereby you can eliminate 3, eliminate 1, and thereby you reach to your conclusion, that is B. So this is basically how you answer question. While practicing, you develop this habit, right? India-Sri Lanka relations has been mentioned in the document, right? There is nothing that I found that I needed to explain unless you ask a question, right? Unless you ask a question. But there is an organization which is mentioned there, which I think needed to be explained or expanded at least. All right? Content पहले खोल के देख लो, India Sri Lanka का। Right? क्या लिखा हुआ है भाई? India and Sri Lanka have signed an MOU for the Bharat Electronics Limited to set up a state-of-the-art maritime rescue coordination center in Colombo. All right? In its own, this news is not of great value. It's just an example of cooperation between India and Bangladesh. Another example, a diverse example, right? But the basics, Maritime Rescue Coordination Center, explained in the document itself. That's why I say read it, right? These are part of an international network under UN's International Maritime Organization to monitor the sea lanes with the objective of swift response to emergencies such as vessels in distress, rescue and evacuation of people, prevention of and containing environmental disasters such as oil spills, etc. Right? So basically, IMO is an intergovernmental organization, which is a specialized agency of the UN. All right? Now, why is this agency created? Because if you see, shipping or development of laws of sea has been a very interesting area, because shipping has been used by countries for wars, but also for trade. And most of global trade, at least long containerized trade, long distance containerized trade, is through the oceans, right? So these are very commonsensical things that you understand. And then thereby you also understand, since every country is relying on, to some degree, for their supply chains on the oceans, oceans require governance. So first of all, if you have laws like UNCLOS, what are they saying? They are providing simply the principles which can be applicable if the sovereigns decide to use them as the basis of determining their maritime boundary or determining rights and obligations. Right? अगर करना चाहते हैं तो UNCLOS only provides a set of principles. All right? So what is it that UNCLOS does? So UNCLOS says that for deciding the zones of sovereignty in the ocean from the coastline of a state, you basically first draw an imaginary technical baseline. Any water inside the baseline is territorial waters, meaning like the territory over a country has absolute sovereignty. 12 nautical miles from the baseline is called the area, what is it called? The contiguous zone. पक्का? Internal waters है पहला वाला, territorial waters और internal waters. फिर 12 nautical miles, I'm forgetting the name. 12 nautical miles, contiguous zone उसके बाद आएगा. All right? Territorial waters. Internal waters, baseline के अंदर internal waters, 12 nautical mile, territorial waters. अब इसका मतलब क्या है? Your sovereignty is like it is on the land, but there are certain exceptions to it. For example, in the territorial waters, every ship, if it is passing for a bona fide purpose from point A to point B has the right to innocent passage. All right, you cannot stop a ship from passing from your territorial waters. All right, you can always apprehend somebody who is trying to enter illegally through the land, right? But in the water, you cannot say, hey, this is my territorial water, you can't enter. Right to innocent passage. This exception is there. Thereby, the sovereignty extends in the water column, on the seabed, on the water surface, and in the airspace above. So this is the extent of sovereignty in terms of application of laws in the territorial water. After territorial water, there is contiguous zone, another 12 nautical miles, together 24 nautical miles. So contiguous zone is basically understand that as you are moving away from the coast, your sovereignty is getting diluted, right? So what is happening in contiguous water? Your sovereignty is applicable on the surface of the water, in the water column, on the seabed, right? Now the seabed is continental shelf, right? As you start going away from the coast. So that is where your sovereignty is. But your sovereignty is limited to application of certain kinds of laws, right? Basically custom rules, sanitary and phytosanitary rules, financial rules, right? So this is something that is clearly applicable in the contiguous zone. But the one difference, another difference from territorial waters is that your sovereignty does not extend to the airspace. All right, that is international airspace above the contiguous zone. Territorial waters mein airspace is also your own sovereign jurisdiction. Now, the furthest extent of sovereign zone provided by UNCLOS is exclusive economic zone. The extent of exclusive economic zone is 200 nautical miles. Now, within this zone, what you have is, and 200 nautical miles is the terminus. So, meaning within this entire zone, you have right to exploit, develop resources on the seabed, which is, if you understand, continental shelf, in the water column, depth of water, on the sea surface, right, water surface. So if there are any resources, living, non-living, you have the exclusive right to develop them, exploit them. All right, no other country can claim right over resources, right? Beyond 200 nautical miles is what is called the area and the high sea. All right, high sea is the water column, the depth, and the area is the seabed. All right, so this is basically global commons. High sea is global commons. The area is global commons. All right. So beyond 200 nautical miles, wherever it is applicable. हर देश में 200 nautical miles होगा कि नहीं होगा, ये आप सोचने लगते हैं. So UNCLOS provides exceptions or special cases also, but सबसे ज़्यादा जाना जाता है इस चीज़ के लिए, right? The zones, right? Demarcation of zones. समझ में आई अभी तक बात? So 200 nautical miles beyond, you don't have sovereign claims. So that is global commons. Now that is governed by certain institutions created by UNCLOS. All right. What are the institutions? You have the International Seabed Authority, right? International Seabed Authority. For example, if you want to do deep seabed mining, right, in the area, then you have to go through the International Seabed Authority, which is located in Kingston, Jamaica. All right. Then you have the Commission on the Delimitation of Continental Shelf, which basically operates from the headquarters of UN in New York, right? Commission on the Delimitation of Continental Shelf. So what is its utility? So it's not a hard and fast rule that you can only have 200 nautical miles of continental shelf. Generally that is basically the limit. You can extend your continental shelf, but you have to prove the reasonableness of the claim. Where? At the Commission for the Delimitation of Continental Shelf, right? And the third body which is created by the UNCLOS is an arbitration tribunal, ITLOS, all right? International Tribunal on the Law of the Seas, all right? Hamburg, Germany, mein ye located. So this is what you know about UNCLOS. UNCLOS is talked about a lot, but UNCLOS is only a set of rules, laws. Now you need executive agencies also, all right? Meaning the agencies which are working to deal with day-to-day issues coming in the course of long distance or short distance movement of ships through the ocean, because oceans are vast. So here comes the specialized agencies of UN called International Maritime Organization. ठीक है? International Maritime Organization. तो इसके बारे में हमको थोड़ा सा ही जानना है, क्योंकि again द मोर यू वांट टू गो इन डेप्थ, आपको टाइम लगाना पड़ेगा। ऐसा नहीं है कि आप जान नहीं सकते, पर एग्जाम के लिए टाइम की वैल्यू है, तो कुछ इंफॉर्मेशन वैल्यूएबल है, राइट। इतना पता हो उसके बाद सोचो कि और क्या, राइट। शुरुआत से ही ये नहीं सोचना चाहिए कि मैं इस अनक्लॉज का एक्सपर्ट बन जाऊंगा, नहीं बन पाओगे। ऑलराइट, एनी लीगल डॉक्यूमेंट हैज अ लॉट ऑफ रीडिंग गोइंग ऑन एट एनी गिवन पॉइंट इन टाइम, राइट। तो इंटरनेशनल मैरीटाइम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्पेशलाइज एजेंसी है किसकी? यूएन की। ये किस लिए काम करती है, क्या काम करती है, व्हाट इज इट दैट इट डज? It is responsible for measures to improve the safety and security of international shipping and to prevent pollution from ships. All right. IMO ka headquarters is in London, right? So basically, if you see, international shipping business is governed by Western institutions. The implication is, if you want to buy oil from Russia or buy oil from Iran, you have to carry it through some oil tankers, right? तो यहाँ पे अब आइडिया आता है कि ये ऑयल टैंकर कहाँ का है, हुज फ्लैग इज इट फ्लाइंग, वेयर इज इट रजिस्टर्ड. सो दिस इज द कॉम्प्लेक्स बिट, बट द इजी बिट इज दिस. The IMO was established by the convention of the same name, right? The UN Maritime, International Maritime Organization Convention. It was established in actual terms in 1958. It meets for the first time in 1959. It has 175 member states, 3 associate member states. India is also a member. So this kind of body does a lot of work. Interaction with experts, industry bodies, government. क्योंकि इस shipping के area में ये सारे लोग involved हैं. Right? So IMO thereby becomes an important organization as a basic from the news that has been provided in the content on Sri Lanka. देख लिया आपने? Right? यहाँ जानना हमको simple इतना है. IMO was established through a UN convention of 1948. It was finally formed in 1958 in terms of actual structure. Right? But the convention basically carried the idea. 175 members हैं इसके, right? And you will not find it difficult to remember that its basic aim is to facilitate and regulate global shipping. All right? तो बहुत सारे काम करता है IMO, बहुत सारे conventions हैं IMO के, और जो safety related standards हैं global shipping industry के, वो एक जैसे हैं, uniform रहने चाहिए. So these kinds of bodies basically create uniformity in laws, rules, standard practices, all right, by bringing together the relevant stakeholders. चलो आगे चलते हैं, right? So this is about the content on Sri Lanka. चलिए, right? तो पढ़ लिया आपने. पढ़ने के बाद जो बेसिक चीज निकली यही निकली कि भाई इंडिया is now helping Bangladesh, Sri Lanka in setting up maritime rescue coordination center, right? In the oceans. Why are the oceans important? Of course, ecologically, from environmental perspective, from the perspective of regulation of climate, oceans are important. That's the scientific aspect of it, right? So if you are preparing, let's say, oceans, look at the question that UPSC asks. Last year, UPSC in the mains examination asked questions about the economic significance of straits and isthmus, all right? So now that is a question wherein if you can bring in IMO conventions, well, that would be a value addition to your paper 1 answer, right? ये interconnections हैं UPSC के, right? क्योंकि knowledge अलग अलग नहीं है, बस ease के लिए अलग अलग subjects में divide कर दिया गया है, right? So what are these? पढ़ेंगे तो अपने आप समझ में आ जाएगा. Part of international network under UN's International Maritime Organization to monitor the sea lanes. Sea lanes. कभी भी एटलस देखा होगा, मैप देखा होगा, तो you will find dotted lines connecting point A to point B. What are these? These are the pathways that ships, whether naval ships or commercial ships, all right? So commercial shipping or merchant shipping is called white shipping. That's why you will have white shipping agreement for commercial shipping, for exchange of information, right? And naval shipping generally is associated with the color blue, right? So these two kinds of activities are there in the ocean. So sea lanes of communication, when navies are moving through the sea, they would like to maintain communication with land. That is through these passageways. When trade is moving, we call them trade routes, all right? So sea lanes of communication. That's why oceans are important. Now if you see, jagah jagah pe along the coast, you would have monitoring stations. So that means it would be within the jurisdiction of a particular country. So this these stations basically act as nodal points through which information is gathered, and these kinds of information are there with national authority, but they are also collated by bodies like IMO. So the second role of these kinds of organization is to collate data, all right, so that they can first of all predict any crisis, or they can issue early warning, or they can improve their safety guidelines. ठीक है, IMO ये काम करता है. Each country is responsible for its own search and rescue in the region. अभी मैं एक डॉक्यूमेंट्री देख रहा था और मुझे याद आया कि कैसे 10 साल बीत जाते हैं. The Malaysian airliner which had disappeared, very interesting case, है ना. आपने भी सुना होगा, MH380 ऐसा कुछ फ्लाइट नंबर था. It just took off, it was going to China and it suddenly disappeared. All right, so there were a lot of theories, projections were made, engineers were called in, and finally it was decided that the aircraft had changed its course, and then it finally had went towards Indian Ocean, southern Indian Ocean. And search and rescue operation फिर हुआ, तो किसने search and rescue operation किया? Of course, Malaysia would do it, but Malaysia alone can't do it. Indonesia was involved, India was involved, Australia was involved, US Navy was involved. So these are called HADR operations, right? Humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, search and rescue operations. ठीक है, तो ओशियंस में ये भी होता है. ट्रेड, स्ट्रेटेजिक कंपटीशन, वॉर, नेवल वॉरफेयर प्लस HADR operations, right? So this is the entire maritime domain as we are talking about. उसमें जोड़ लो environmental concern, pollution related concern. So this is basically covering the entire spectrum of what we call the maritime domain. All right. So MRCC is coordinated by Navy or Coast Guard in each country. Basic information, in India the Coast Guard is the coordinating agency, right? Coast Guard की जिम्मेदारी है coastal security को ensure करना, right? Navy की जिम्मेदारी है entire spectrum of maritime security, right? Close to the coast but also beyond the coast. चलिए आगे चलते हैं, right? So we are here in terms of content, India, Sri Lanka. Now rest of the data is about India-Sri Lanka relations. As I said, areas of engagement. So trade. This was the first country with which India signed a free trade agreement, standalone free trade agreement in South Asia, right? 1999 we signed it, 2000 we applied it, right? Sri Lanka remains among the largest trade partners of India and SAARC. No, not the case, but India certainly remains the largest trading partner of Sri Lanka, right? Sometimes second largest trading partner, sometimes first largest trading partner. So from India's side, this is true. India is also one of the largest contributors to foreign direct investment in Sri Lanka. India's investment in Sri Lanka is around $2 billion US. So in terms of numbers, that's not very high, but this gives you an idea that these are areas of engagement. When you're talking about economic aspects of relations, these kinds of data you should be thinking about. Let's move forward. Sri Lanka is one of India's major development partners. So basically, we have provided nearly more than 3.6 billion US dollars of development assistance to Sri Lanka. It involves grants. So that is what has been mentioned here, 570 million US dollars of grants and various loans and project support that we have provided to Sri Lanka. But apart from that, last year, Sri Lanka's economic crisis, meaning starting in 2020 and from 2020 till 2022 also, we have provided various kinds of assistance to Sri Lanka, including lines of credits, including currency swap, including offering the concessional line of credit for particular transactional purposes, like oil खरीदने के लिए पैसा दिया, क्यों? Because Sri Lanka buys oil from our companies. So that payment should continue. All right, so it comes around 4 billion US dollars of recent assistance in the economic crisis of Sri Lanka. इसका क्वेश्चन भी UPSC ने मेंस में पूछ लिया, इसीलिए, राइट? तो ये आपको एग्जाम्पल मिलेंगे हर जगह पे, और इसके अलावा कल्चर का एग्जाम्पल मिलेगा, राइट? सो आई विल यूज ओनली वन माउस, दैट्स बेटर. तो इसके अलावा कल्चर का एग्जाम्पल मिलेगा, और सारे रिलेशन में यही मिलेगा आपको, राइट? So what is the cultural example? So we say basically India and Sri Lanka share a relation of Mitratva Maga, path of friendship. That comes from the title of their joint statement in 2020 after the Prime Ministerial Summit, Mitratva Maga. As I said, nature of the relationship, a term to describe the relationship, areas of engagement. Now what is the cultural element of it? Of course, shared element of Buddhism. linguistic similarities between various languages spoken in Sri Lanka. Tamil or Sinhala, both have similarities with languages spoken in India. Similarly, there is Buddhist heritage, where King Ashoka sent his daughter, Princess Sangamitra, and son, Prince Mahendra or Mahinda. So that is something that is remembered. So that's the cultural association. When Kushinagar International Airport was inaugurated, the first flight which came to it was from Sri Lanka. All right. Now, in terms of other aspects of religious, cultural, civilizational ties, we find in the story of Ramayana the association with Sri Lanka. Right. So governments also understand this, that these are symbolic measures. So in the construction of Ram temple, we are now receiving stones, bricks from the temple in Sri Lanka. Right. So these are cultural aspects. These are aspects of soft power in any relationship. Now, you have an understanding कि किसी relation में क्या होता है, ये पर्पस था इसको बताने का, राइट? बाकी सारे रिलेशन अगर आपने पढ़े होते तो बड़ा आसान काम हो जाता हमारे लिए, लेकिन अब ये देखते हैं कच्चा तीवू आइलैंड. कच्चा तीवू आइलैंड लोकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन बना सकता है, ठीक है? तो इसको अब देखो, कच्चा तीवू आइलैंड क्या है? कच्चा तीवू आइलैंड इज पार्ट ऑफ श्रीलंका. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, India and Sri Lanka demarcated their maritime boundary in 1974. They signed an agreement. 1976, they exchanged letters for clarifying the other aspects of maritime boundary, including prohibition of fishing by the fishermen of both countries in each other's waters. Right? So this is the period in which India-Sri Lanka maritime boundary has been demarcated. And demarcation of boundary is always a sovereign act. First of all, you should understand. So don't try to apply UNCLOS here. All right. So now, if you see, the issue is the issue of fishermen. What is the issue? So 1979 onwards, what you will see is fishing in this area dwindled because security situation worsened. 2009 civil war in Sri Lanka ended. LTT was decimated by the Sri Lankan government. That's a separate topic. But after that, fishing increased in this region. All right. In what region? Park Bay region. This is the Park Bay. All right. Now, what is the issue? That in Tamil Nadu, this has become an emotive issue because of instances of firing at the boat of Indian fishermen, who are of course Tamil fishermen, arrest of Indian fishermen, killing, reports of killing during this firing of Indian fishermen, confiscation of their boats. So, you understand, India is a federal polity. So, issue of a state is also the concern of the union government, because we are talking about our people. So, chief ministers of Tamil Nadu have been writing to the prime minister on this issue. And this issue then through diplomatic channels have been raised with Sri Lanka. And in 2016, India and Sri Lanka established a joint working group. Right? Joint working group. क्या करते हैं आप? मिनिस्टर ऑर्डर देते हैं और फिर डायलॉग के लिए जॉइंट वर्किंग ग्रुप जैसे मैकेनिज्म एस्टैब्लिश हुआ था जहां ऑफिशियल्स बातचीत करते हैं. राइट? सो जॉइंट वर्किंग ग्रुप 2016 एस्टैब्लिश्ड, वहां पे हम बातचीत करते हैं. नाउ व्हाट इज द मेन इशू? द मेन इशू इज दैट द फिशरमैन आर अकस्टम्ड टू फिश इन दिस एरिया फॉर सेंचुरीज. B, the practice that they adopt is bottom trawling, meaning use of heavy metal nets to dredge the ocean surface. Now it's a shallow body of water, all right, because geographically it is so, right? You understand the concept of bay or gulf, right, or strait from geography. यहाँ geography ऐसे जोड़ सकते हो. So if you see, this means that fishermen are unintendedly crossing over the maritime boundary. Right? So Sri Lanka's concern is a sanctity of its maritime boundary, encroachment upon the livelihood of Sri Lankan fishermen, and also the environmental degradation caused by bottom trawling. What has India done? India has assured that we will phase out bottom trawling because we understand it is environmentally degrading, and we have also then been working on various mechanisms to address or manage this issue. For example, we are discussing better patrolling of these waters by the Coast Guard. We are discussing how we can promote cooperative mechanisms involving fishermen of both sides, fishing community of both sides. We are also discussing how technology can be used to basically put in place early warning systems or monitoring devices on the ships. So these are various things. Because of this, it is in news. Now, most of these instances are reported around Kachativu. Because the fishermen were accustomed to drying their nets in this area, this island is uninhabited, so this practice continues. So sometimes there is also a demand the honorable member of parliament from Tamil Nadu have raised this issue in parliament of taking back Kachativu from Sri Lanka. But understand, it is through a sovereign agreement that this boundary has been decided. So it's not possible. At best, if you have that opinion, your suggestion should be we should negotiate with Sri Lanka leasing back Kachativu for a long term period, right? But again, इसके अलावा इसके अंदर कुछ नहीं है, right? इस न्यूज़ आर्टिकल और न्यूज़ इन्फॉर्मेशन पीस में कुछ भी नहीं है, right? Unless you have a question, I move forward, right? और let's say backward. कुछ और कंटेंट बचा होगा, उसको भी देख लेते हैं. बहुत सारे लोगों को पेज कवर करना है ना, तो अब ये बांग्लादेश में कुछ एक्सप्लेन करना हो तो मुझे बता दो. Is there anything that you would like me to explain in Bangladesh? Is there any term? Is there anything, any content mentioned which I should explain? We have dealt with Bangladesh differently. Through my method, you have the content also. Is there any term? Anyone? किसी ने तो पढ़ा होगा. भैया बांग्लादेश पूछ रहा हूँ ना अभी. कहाँ? यहाँ ये देखो सामने. आई एम गोइंग टू द टेक्स्ट. ना कंटेंट तो मैंने बहुत सारा आपको तैयार करा दिया. जो जो मुझे लगा एग्जाम वर्दी है या टेक्निकल क्वेश्चंस आ सकते हैं तो उसकी इंफॉर्मेशन कम से कम हो. राइट? ऑन बांग्लादेश. सो एज आई सेड, ये कंटेंट कहता है वी आर निगोशिएटिंग, वी हैव साइंड वेरियस एग्रीमेंट्स विद बांग्लादेश. किन एरियाज में होंगे? एरियाज ऑफ एंगेजमेंट एज वी हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट. राइट? सो दैट मीन्स द रेस्ट ऑफ द कंटेंट इज ओनली एग्जाम्पल. राइट? सो basic details. 4096 kilometer of border, meaning Bangladesh and India have the longest land border in South Asia. Or in other words, with Bangladesh, India shares its longest land border. It is not China, it is Bangladesh. Number 1, Bangladesh. Number 2, China border. Number 3, Pakistan border. All right. Number 4, Nepal border. Number 5, Myanmar border. Number 6, Bhutan border. Number 7, Afghanistan border. All right. So this is basically chronological order as you do your value addition. ये सारी बातें मैं कर चुका हूँ. जो बॉक्स में है, एक रिवर पे जो एग्रीमेंट हुआ, दैट इज कुशियारा रिवर. वेरी सिंपल क्वेश्चन, इफ एट ऑल शुड बी आस्क्ड ऑन दिस. कुशियारा रिवर इज लोकेटेड इन, तो ये डिटेल दिया हुआ है ना. शेयरिंग ऑफ वाटर्स ऑफ कुशियारा रिवर, फर्स्ट सच पैक्ट साइंड आफ्टर गंगा वाटर ट्रीटी 1996. नॉट नेसेसरली द केस. Before this 2019 also we had signed a limited agreement for water sharing, drawing of water from Feni river, all right, for Tripura, all right. So ये इसमें हुआ है. तो इसका मतलब ये, once you are aware of areas of engagement, what happens is any new information can be added within that category. That this is economic information, this is about rivers, this is about border, right. Now Kushiara rivers forms on India-Bangladesh border as a branch of Barak river, so it is a tributary of Barak river. ठीक है. Barak separates into Kushiara and Surma, 2 streams, and then finally these streams come together with various other streams as Meghna river. समझ गए आप इस बात को? चलिए, states in India sharing borders with this particular country: Assam, West Bengal, Mizoram, Meghalaya and Tripura. Right? ये पाकिस्तान में भी हमने किया था. Very simple factual things that you can do yourself. Right? Let's move forward. Bangladesh is India's biggest trade partner. एक बार content से आगे चले जाने दो, फिर बोल लेना. ये डिटेल भी हम बात कर चुके हैं. ठीक है. इसकी बात भी हम कर चुके, इसकी बात भी हम कर चुके, इसकी बात भी हम कर चुके, और ये आ गया, ये लास्ट में हर जगह मेंशन होता है, सार्क, बिम्स्टेक. राइट? BBIN. व्हाट इज BBIN? सिंपली एन एक्रोनिम फॉर कोऑपरेटिव मैकेनिज्म्स बिटवीन बांग्लादेश, भूटान, इंडिया, नेपाल. व्हाट इज द प्राइमरी एग्रीमेंट दैट दे आर इंप्लीमेंटिंग राइट नाउ? BBIN मोटर व्हीकल एग्रीमेंट, विच वाज साइंड इन द ईयर 2015. वो इंप्लीमेंट कर रहे हैं. But they can cooperate because of their potential in other areas also. Connectivity is one. Economic cooperation, people to people ties obviously would flow from this. But there is also management of water resources, power generation, power trade. These are the potential of BBIN. Right? IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation. All right? Indian Ocean Rim Association इसका नाम है, इसका पुराना नाम है Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation. इसकी हिस्ट्री क्या है? 1995 it is founded as Indian Ocean Rim Initiative. Why? Because Nelson Mandela had come to India and he expressed the idea that Indian Ocean connects culturally, socially many of these countries. Why not translate this into the idea of political, social, economic cooperation? So this is a body, only Indian Ocean wide body, which promotes cooperation for development in the region, primarily focuses on development. And since it is maritime region, Indian Ocean, so you would also understand that prominent part of this cooperation development is the maritime cooperation, development of blue economy, an economy based on ocean, maritime resources. ठीक है? So Indian Ocean Rim Association formally is launched in 1997, and then in 2013 its name is changed to current name, Indian Ocean Rim Association, right? Its secretariat is in Mauritius, a place called Ebene in Mauritius, EBENE in Mauritius is the headquarters. Now it right now has 24 members, all right? So this is something that keeps on changing, but one thing that you should have an idea of, who are the prominent members? The prominent members, of course, are India, Sri Lanka, Maldives from India's own neighborhood, also Myanmar, Thailand. These are the prominent members, right? But also France is a member of Indian Ocean Rim Association. Why? Because France has a territory in the Indian Ocean called the Reunion Islands, right? तो ये बहुत बार आया होगा, हर रिलेशन के अंत में आ रहा है कि इंडिया और ये कंट्री इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के पार्ट है. तो ये अपने आप में इंफॉर्मेशन अगर आप स्टैटिकली पढ़ोगे और सोचोगे कि ये सवाल आएगा, नहीं, पर आप अपना नोट्स बना सकते हो. पहली बार जैसे ही ये आता है आप 2-3 चीजें लिख लो. सार्क वाज फॉर्म्ड इन 1985. इट हैज 8 मेंबर्स. इट्स सेक्रेटेरिएट इज इन काठमांडू. सो फार इट हैज हेल्ड 18 समिट, राइट? ऐसा सिंपल बेसिक डिटेल्स, कहीं पे भी अपने नोट्स बना रहे हो तो ऐसा आप कर सकते हो. चलो और आगे चले, राइट? अब ये सब एग्जाम्पल क्या है? रूपसा ब्रिज, राइट? इट इज ऑन द फेनी रिवर and it basically cuts short the time that states like Tripura would require to go to Chittagong port. All right, so it's a project again implemented through India's development assistance, right? So development assistance is benefiting the other country, but sometimes it can also be employed to benefit one's own interests also, right? ये पार्वतीपुर कोनिया रेलवे लाइन या खुलना दर्शना रेलवे लिंक प्रोजेक्ट, दीज आर ऑल एग्जाम्पल. मैत्री पावर प्लांट एट रामपाल, दिस इज ऑल्सो एन एग्जाम्पल ऑफ जॉइंट प्रोजेक्ट. ऑल राइट, अब आप ये देख लो. अब बताओ क्या सवाल है? कोई सवाल है इसमें से? ऐसी कोई लिस्ट है क्या कहीं पे? बोलो तो कोई कोचिंग वाला निकाल भी देगा. तो या देखो, ये जो सवाल होना है ये भी याद करना पड़ेगा या वो भी याद करना पड़ेगा. इट्स मिसिंग द पॉइंट, प्रिसाइजली मिसिंग द पॉइंट व्हाट दैट आई हैव बीन एम्फसाइजिंग. सी, इसको अलग से याद करने की कभी जरूरत नहीं पड़ती. जब भी आप अखबार पढ़ रहे हो, रिपीटिशन कर रहे हो, लगातार हर आर्टिकल में छपा होगा कि इससे पहले CEPA was signed with Japan, now we have signed with UAE, we are also interested in signing a CEPA with Bangladesh, right? तो इसको अलग से लिस्ट बना के याद करने की मुझसे अगर सलाह लोगे तो जरूरत नहीं है. सिंपली पढ़ते रहो, है ना? अगर पढ़ रहे हो तो ये सवाल नहीं आता कि ये याद रखना पड़ेगा क्या. वाई? बिकॉज इफ यू आर रीडिंग विद पेशेंस, आफ्टर अ व्हाइल यू रियलाइज दैट मोस्ट ऑफ द थिंग्स आर रिपीटिशन. देयर आर ओनली फ्यू न्यू एडिशंस. सो रिपीटिशन consolidates what I've learned, and new addition basically is value addition to what my content is. तो सवाल का जवाब बहुत ही सिंपल सा है, यही. पार्वतीपुर कोनिया लाइन, मैत्री पावर प्लांट और कुछ इसके अलावा. अब बताओ, इंडिया श्रीलंका फाउंडेशन क्या था? क्या है इंडिया श्रीलंका फाउंडेशन? सवाल आप पूछ रहे थे, क्या लिखा हुआ? लाइन भी पढ़ के मुझे बताना. पढ़ के बताओ पूरी लाइन. तो अब इसमें मैं एक्सप्लेन क्या करूं सर? फाउंड किस साल में हुआ लिख दिया. इनिशिएटिव ऑफ इंडिया श्रीलंका टू प्रमोट व्हाट? सिविल सोसाइटी एक्सचेंजेस. तो अब ये बताइए, इस पूरी लाइन में एक्सप्लेन क्या करूं मैं? ये लाइन तो अपने आप में सेल्फ एक्सप्लेनेटरी है. अब आप क्वेश्चन बना पाएंगे तो क्वेश्चन हो सकता है सिविल सोसाइटी क्या होता है, सिविल सोसाइटी एक्सचेंजेस क्या होते हैं, यही सवाल हो सकता है ना, अगर आप लाइन को पूरी तरह से पढ़ें. ठीक है, अदरवाइज तो अंग्रेजी को ट्रांसलेट करने का हो गया बस मतलब. तो सिविल सोसाइटी एक्सचेंजेस का मतलब diplomacy between or engagement between two countries or two states. First of all, relations are between states, not governments. Governments basically are executive agencies of state, right? manifestation of powers of state. So state relation are between government to government, between businesses to business, between people to people. इसी को कहते हैं ना G2G ties, B2B ties, P2P ties. So this P2P ties or to large extent B2B ties largely will fall in the ambit of civil society exchanges. Cultural exchanges, sporting exchanges, exchanges between think tanks, academics, retired professionals, retired diplomats, all these initiatives would go under civil society exchanges. So generally this is tracks of diplomacy. Track 1 between governments, official representation. Track 2 non-official representation between people, engagement between people. All right, and track 1.5, a combination of these two, both official and non-official participation in any diplomatic effort. अब बताओ complicated था क्या ये? नहीं, तो पहले तो ये भी मतलब आप समझे ना कि आप केवल अंग्रेजी पूछ रहे हैं या आपका सवाल आ गया है अभी कि इसमें मुझे क्या समझ में नहीं आया, क्योंकि वो लाइन अगर आप ध्यान से दोबारा पढ़ेंगे तो आपको खुद रियलाइज होगा कि इन्फॉर्मेशन है, किस साल में बना, क्या करता है. ठीक है. See, first of all, we don't use the term conditionalities, but yes, in development finance there is conditionality. There is always a condition. Nobody gives anything for free. हाँ हाँ, मैं अब बात पूरी कर लूँ, मैं आपका सवाल समझ गया. तो whether we give loan or whether we give aid or grant, all right, ये तो domestic public finance से भी आपको समझ में आता होगा, right? Grant in aid क्या होता है? So when we provide loan, there is always an expectation that it would be returned back. So it's a commercial instrument of supporting development. In that also there is no foundation from India that where you should be using it. Development priorities are of the borrower, right? Line of credit is an offer. ऐसा नहीं है कि $8 billion US जाके suitcase में उसको दे के आए. It's an offer. If you decide upon, you can draw from this fund that we have. Right? So it has to be returned. Priority of development is of that borrowing country, but line of credit comes with a condition. 75% of project value import should be from India. All right? Only Indian companies are eligible to bid for the projects implemented through LOC, line of control. तो जहाँ पे भी commercial aspect होगा, वहाँ पे conditionalities would be more effective. Grants के साथ conditionalities are not so open. All right? Unless you want to use grants as an instrument to achieve some objective. ठीक है, तो grants के साथ generally conditionality इंडिया में नहीं होता, पर grants के साथ भी conditionality होता है और जगह से, जैसे World Bank etc. would talk about your basically human rights, environmental conditions, labor condition. So जब conditionality कहते हैं, these terms are basically used in the context of financing of development through traditional multilateral channels like World Bank, IMF, or through traditional lenders. जो lenders of the north. Generally we say that our assistance is free of conditionality, but just understand no country can continue doing charity, so there is also a commercial aspect to it, which generally is applicable through instruments like LOC, line of credit. और कुछ? चलिए, तो ये हो गया आपका बांग्लादेश. आगे नेपाल भी इसी तरह से जल्दी से कर लेते हैं. नाउ यू हैव द कॉन्सेप्ट आइडिया. सो लेट्स सी व्हाई नेपाल इन न्यूज. India Nepal ink 8 pacts. It's a regular occurrence in any relation that we keep on signing various agreements. It's a peculiar way of teaching that sometimes people insist कि मैं तुम्हें सारे agreement लिखा दे रहा हूँ, ये value addition है. नहीं, UPSC के अंदर इसकी कोई value नहीं है. Some agreements which are novel, which are very important, those agreements often are important for UPSC. और ये कैसे पता चलता है हमको? क्योंकि जब भी ऐसा कोई भारी भरकम एग्रीमेंट साइन होगा, इट वुड बी डिस्कस्ड एट लेंथ इन पब्लिक डोमेन. वन ऑफ द sources in public domain is newspaper. So simply, if an agreement is continuously in news in the newspapers, make it a point to study it in detail. डिटेल में स्टडी करने का क्या मतलब? उतना ही जितना अखबार में आ रहा है. All newspapers have become UPSC oriented because you are their biggest audience. आप ही खरीदते हैं उसको. That's why explained section. That's why in Shekhar Gupta videos also you will find that I find them very good videos for UPSC. UPSC के लिए वो वीडियो देखो. All right? वो UPSC पढ़ा रहे हैं शेखर गुप्ता साहब द प्रिंट पे, तो वो आप देख सकते हैं. गुड. ऑल राइट. अच्छा इन्फॉर्म डिबेट होती है. राज्यसभा टीवी अच्छा इन्फॉर्म डिबेट होती है, वो देखो. न्यूज़ मत देखो. न्यूज़ का मतलब जो ट्रेडिशनल न्यूज़ चैनल्स हैं उससे केवल ब्लड प्रेशर बढ़ता है, जानकारी नहीं मिलती. यूपीएससी एस्पिरेंट गो टू लोकसभा टीवी. अब तो खैर संसद टीवी हो गया वो. राइट? चलिए आगे चलते हैं. नेपाल के साथ क्या? So again, areas of nature of relation. What is the nature of relation? Friendly, right? Why? Because we share geography, we share culture, we share civilizational links, people to people ties. There is a lot of interconnection between India and Nepal. We signed a treaty of friendship in 1950, which basically is the broadest basis of the political diplomatic pillar of India-Nepal relation. But this relationship is also marked by friction. This friction is of the nature of friction between siblings. All right. So basically, we don't look at it the way we look at it China relation or Pakistan relation. Some people may have made a habit of looking at it in that way, right? So thereby, what areas of engagements are there? So of course, one area of engagement would be political diplomatic, which means exchanges, diplomatic exchanges. Only then agreements come into picture. All right. So you have India-Nepal Joint Commission, which was established in 1987. It is a foreign minister level forum, meaning highest regular forum of dialogue, where all the areas of relation are reviewed. The progress is reviewed. India-Nepal Joint Commission. So far it has held 6 meetings. ठीक है? Second, the area of cooperation is borders. All right? So it's very clear. Various sources would say 1751 kilometers. Some sources would say 1800 kilometers. So understand, sometimes in UPSC the ballpark figure is enough, because UPSC also understands that there is variance in the number which is used. All right. So now this border is through multiple states in India: Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, and Sikkim. All right. These are the bordering states. So thereby it means, since the border is in plains, the exchanges have been very prominent and historic. So thereby the border is open in nature. It's not a product of any treaty, it's only a matter of custom and usage. All right, in law, custom and usage, अगर आप प्रूफ कर पाए कि बहुत लंबे समय से ये हो रहा है, तो कस्टम और यूसेज को भी एक तरह का लॉ या बेसिस ऑफ लॉ मान लिया जाता है. So no treaty decides it's an open treaty, it's the people and geography and history which has decided this practice, and no government has sought to curb it. All right. So that's one about border. Now the second aspect is this border delineated? This border is not completely delineated. Delineation is an ongoing process. 1981, India and Nepal had established a joint level technical team which conducted surveys. 98% of the border is in these strip maps which have been prepared, but these strip maps have not been ratified through a treaty. So that's why it's an ongoing process. So there is, this means lack of clarity on 2% of the border area. So it is reflected in the major points of difference. One is Kala Pani. Kala Pani is on the banks of Mahakali river. So this has been a long standing difference, which Nepal has also highlighted. Kala Pani is on the tri-junction between India, China and Nepal. All right, it's a strategically important area for India because India maintains a security presence here. So the difference comes from the interpretation, different interpretation of British era treaties like the 1816 Treaty of Sogoli, and also some technical aspects like what exactly is the origin of river Kali. All right, what is the origin of river Mahakali? So these are technical differences, but thereby there are different territorial claims. Second is an area called Susta. That is another territorial example. Susta is on the banks of Gandak, right? So Susta, Gandak, this is one pair. Kalapani, Mahakali, this is second pair, right? Now if you see, the Susta issue has come up because of the nature of the river, the nature of the topography, meaning fundamental geography. The Treaty of Sogoli earmarked some rivers at some points as borders between India and Nepal. But the Gandak is notorious for changing its course because these are alluvial plains, these are fast moving rivers which are now just entering, right, into the plains. So erosion is caused and rivers change their course. So Gandak changed course, and now the village of Susta falls on India's side of the bank, whereas earlier it was on Nepal's side. So this is second dispute in nature. Third is 2020, the new map of Nepal. Now that was a political act where Nepal's government in its wisdom decided to extend a claim which was unacceptable to India. It issued a map backing this claim. So now Nepal included larger areas, right? What larger areas? Simply understand the triangular area covering Kalapani, Limpiadhura, इस तरह के मैप बहुत अवेलेबल हैं, और Lipu Lake Pass. Lipu Lake Pass is a pass on India-China border through which Kailash Mansarovar shorter route, the yatra, has been taking place. So India built a road, Nepal objected to it, Nepal then went ahead and issued a new map. What did India say? India said that these are untenable expanded claims, we don't accept them. India-Nepal boundary delineation is a continuing process. The need is to take up these issues at the right forum and resolve them in the spirit of good neighborliness. यही response होता है MEA का. But from the perspective of UPSC, basic geography and location, awareness of location is something that is required. Now let's move forward. A lot of connectivity projects are in line between India, in pipeline between India and Nepal. So one is this year, why it was in news, because there is a rail line called the Janakpur-Jayanagar section, which was operating till 2014, but it was a narrow gauge. So as part of the ongoing plan to upgrade the railway infrastructure between these two countries, the line was extended, it was made broad gauge, right? So that construction was continued, and one section of it is now inaugurated. It is between Jayanagar and Kurtha in Nepal. So this is the first broad gauge railway connect between India and Nepal. But the idea is, after 2018 we have signed an agreement to extend India-Nepal railway connectivity to the Kathmandu Valley, right, going beyond border towns like Raxaul. Till Raxaul you have railway service, but beyond that we need to take it forward. So this is an important piece of infrastructure, right? India handed over Solu corridor. अब देखो इस तरह की चीजें आपको याद नहीं करनी होती, because they are too much going into detail. They are only examples of something, which is what, that since we share geography, we also have connections in terms of electricity, right? तो आप देखेंगे 1971 we signed a power exchange agreement. In some border areas it is easier to get electricity from Nepal into India, and in some border areas it is easier to get electricity from India into Nepal. So that is power exchange agreement. 2014 we signed a power trade agreement, खरीद फरोख्त के लिए, commercial agreement, right? So this is basically power sector cooperation, plus now add it to the rivers, the river treaties which we had talked about, right? So it is not a very successful example of hydropower cooperation, but we expect that this needs to improve, and this is going to improve, right? So अब आगे देख लो, कटिया, कुसहा, रक्सौल, परवानीपुर क्या है? ये basically transmission lines हैं. So Nepal is a net importer of electricity from India, whereas Nepal's potential is to become a net exporter itself. All right, so thereby we say it's all the more required that both countries cooperate in water resource or hydropower. Connectivity, bridge over river Mechi, again not a very significant example. Nepal joined the India-led International Solar Alliance. अब अगर ये पूछोगे कि ये याद करना पड़ेगा तो मुझे हंसी आएगी, क्योंकि ये केवल पढ़ना है. आपको सही समय पे अपने दिमाग को अलाउ करो, it would be able to recall the information. If the difficulty is at the level of language, please accept that, acknowledge that, denial में मत जियो, all right? Because the first step of solving anything is to first acknowledge that there is a problem, all right? So don't, make it an actual vanity project or an ego project. If you have found that there is a fundamental weakness in you, try to address that first. लोग आगे बढ़ जाएंगे, बढ़ने दो, right? It's not a race. तो जो भी जहाँ पे है, the message is for different kinds of audience. If it resonates with you, you take it. Now let's go forward, right? Launched India's RuPay card in Nepal, Bhutan, Singapore and UAE, right? So RuPay card now is acceptable in many countries. Nepal is one of them, right? Again, I would say not a very terribly significant information, but in case there is a reference to this in any other question, you will remember it. You will at least remember Nepal. You will at least remember Bhutan, all right? चलिए आगे चलते हैं. इंडिया इंटरनेशनल सेंटर फॉर बुद्धिस्ट कल्चरल हेरिटेज कुछ समझाने के लिए नहीं है मेरे पास, बस ये जो जगह है ना लुम्बिनी, जस्ट रिमेंबर इट, इट्स एन इंपॉर्टेंट लोकेशन. व्हाई? बर्थ प्लेस ऑफ गौतम बुद्धा. इट्स ऑल्सो एन इंपॉर्टेंट टूरिस्ट टाउन. इट्स अ यूनेस्को वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज साइट. China has invested in an airport in this area, and now India is financing the construction of a stupa in this area, right, in this particular city. Now, sister cities. India and Nepal agreed in principle to establish sister city relations between Lumbini and Kushinagar. All right, Lumbini and Kushinagar. If you are aware of the life of Buddha, Buddhism, कहाँ पढ़ते हो आप? बहुत सारी जगहों पे पढ़ते हो इसको, एंशियंट हिस्ट्री में पढ़ते हो, राइट, आर्ट एंड कल्चर में पढ़ते होगे. वैसे ही आईआर में इसका एक एस्पेक्ट है दैट मेनी कंट्रीज आवर कल्चरल सिविलाइजेशनल कनेक्ट इज बुद्धिज्म. विथ नेपाल इट्स बोथ बुद्धिज्म एंड हिंदुइज्म, राइट. So now let's move forward. Saptkosi Dam project. India and Nepal agree to take forward Saptkosi High Dam project on Saptkosi River to control floods in southeast Nepal and northern Bihar to generate hydropower. Now this is one of those projects which should have been completed. But we understand that 1954, 1959, 1996, these are various agreements between India and Nepal on river, have not led to any major projects. All right. चलिए आगे चलते हैं. इससे important है West Seti and Seti. Because as a commercial project, recently Indian entities have been awarded this project, whereas earlier the West Seti project was with a Chinese entity. All right, so in commercial space, these projects are very important because if we implement them, expedite them, and show that we can do it with efficiency, economy, then it means we would be able to establish ourselves as a credible development partner for Nepal. आगे चलें. चलो, वेस्ट सेती, कंचनजुंगा कंजर्वेशन एरिया, ट्रांस बाउंड्री प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाज विद नेपाल, राइट. तो ये बेसिकली बायोडाइवर्सिटी कोऑपरेशन है. अब इसके आगे और जो है डिटेल्स हैं केवल, राइट. पढ़ लेना बस एक बार, नथिंग टेरिबली सिग्निफिकेंट. ये इंफॉर्मेशन हम डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. दिस इज द रीजन, मीनिंग दिस मैप बेसिकली शोज व्हाट आर द न्यू क्लेम्स ऑफ नेपाल. ऑल राइट, दिस ट्राई जंक्शन एरिया, कालापानी, लिपू लेक पास एंड लिम्पिया Dura, all in Uttarakhand, state of Uttarakhand. चलिए, so $7 billion of trade, it's a significant trade, and here also we have a significant trade surplus. So again, understand, Nepal is a proximate important export market for India. Power exchange agreement, power trade agreement बता दिया मैंने. First ever petroleum pipeline. This is also an example of connectivity project. 2015, one of the major concerns in Nepal was that the blockade at the border or the worsening of situation at the border because of the political situation in Nepal had caused shortage of energy, because 99% of Nepal's energy import is from India. India has a virtual monopoly. So in order to assure Nepal that this would be sustained, what we did was we launched a project like Motihari Amlekganj pipeline, right. So far petroleum is carried through truck tankers, now you have a pipeline, right. So first ever cross-border pipeline in South Asia, petroleum pipeline, first ever between India and Nepal, first ever between India and any of its neighbors. All right. अब चलिए और आगे चलते हैं. चलो, इंडिया श्रीलंका हमने कर लिया, ये आप पढ़ लें, आपको समझ में आ जाएगा. कच्चा TUP पहुंच गया. अब इंडिया अफगानिस्तान. now इंडिया अफगानिस्तान पे लास्ट ईयर यूपीएससी ने क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया. अब अफगानिस्तान में जो रहा, और अफगानिस्तान इज इन डॉर्मेंट स्टेज एज फार एज issue is concerned, right, as far as its significance in IR or exam is concerned. क्यों? Because there are now larger crises. This also tells you how fickle our memories are, how fickle minded we human beings are. कल हमारे लिए अफगानिस्तान एक न्यूज़ था, आज भी अफगानिस्तान एक न्यूज़ है, आज यूक्रेन एक न्यूज़ है, कल कोई और एक न्यूज़ हो जाएगा. सो दिस इज द करंट अफेयर्स साइकिल, राइट. सो इसके बारे में आप पढ़ लें एक बार. लेकिन ये न्यूज़ में क्यों था? बिकॉज इंडिया आफ्टर 9 months of closure reopened its embassy at the low level. All right, so we are right now exploring what is our main interest right now in Afghanistan. The main interest in Afghanistan is to remain relevant. Why? Because we don't have a direct connect with Afghanistan, and with Taliban we did not have a very friendly relationship earlier. While previously, before 2021, we had good relations with the Afghan government. We of course enjoyed good image among the Afghan people. All right, and we were working, at least with the help of the US, on other modalities of connecting with Afghanistan, like the Chabahar port. Abhi aisa nahi hai. So then sometimes your relevance is generally sustained by the presence. Jab mushkil samay aaye, sometimes you have to lie low. So what are we doing? So remember, first of all, India's position of Afghanistan is contained in resolution 2593 of the UN Security Council 2021. It is the same month in which India was chairing the Security Council. When Taliban took over Afghanistan, India was the chair of the Security Council. 2593 is this resolution. What does it emphasize? It emphasizes on A, respect for human rights, including minority rights, women's rights, humanitarian access and humanitarian support for Afghan people, and also it emphasized on the need to ensure that those who want to evacuate are allowed to do so. All right? And then the next important aspect was a clear mention of the expectation that international community as well as Taliban is expected to ensure that Afghanistan is not used to promote terrorism. All right? And 2593 clearly names India specific terrorist groups operating from Pakistan, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. So 2593, अगर आपने उसको पकड़ लिया, आपको इंडिया की पोजीशन पता चल गई. So from that, just understand that our engagement with Taliban started in a time of flux. One, we had a lot of people in Afghanistan because of India's development projects. Right? India had committed $3 billion in various development projects, like the Salma Dam, India-Afghanistan friendship dam, that is, like the Parliament building, like the Delaram-Zaranj highway, all right, and 116 projects all across Afghanistan under the new development partnership. So that was one. So the commercial aspect of or the economic aspect of projects is one thing, but the people who are there, that is the priority. So evacuating them, we basically conducted Operation Devi Shakti, all right. So then this would also require at least some semblance of engagement with those who are in power. Secondly, we met the representatives of Taliban in 2021 at the end of August, 31 August. We talked about the same things as contained in resolution 2593, all right. And then we had statements like Taliban wanting India to come back and implement the development projects. Well, that is something on which we will take decision later. But our engagement with Afghan people is something which is more sustainable, which needs to be more sustainable. So thereby, while evacuating others, we also helped in the evacuation of some of the Afghan people, Afghan citizens. I recently met an Afghan Hazara doctor. She is practicing in India. She was educated in India. And she was also one of those people who evacuated Afghanistan after that process. So that was interesting. Now, if you see, so Afghanistan faced double crisis. One is political instability, violence, Taliban coming into power. तो ये आपका obsession बन गया उस समय, पर आप भूल गए. Winters were approaching, COVID-19 was there, so the people, no matter who is in power, were in crisis. So India continued its engagement by providing humanitarian, food, wheat supply plus medical supply. All right, including COVID-19 relevant supplies. Now generally, we didn't do it through Taliban, we did it with humanitarian agencies, UN agencies who are operating there. But sooner rather than later, we need to establish presence there, expressly to ensure that our aid is channeled correctly, but also to ensure that we are on the ground and we can assess whether Taliban has changed, whether there is an opportunity to further open up in Afghanistan. So in purposes say we are there right now, primarily because we have a humanitarian commitment to the people of Afghanistan. ठीक है, तो ये दिया हुआ है various evacuation operations. Operation Sukoon 2006 to evacuate Indian, Sri Lankans and Nepalese citizens from war-hit Lebanon. Israel-Lebanon war was going on at that point in time. Then in 2015 you have Operation Rahat. We sent our naval ships, evacuated 15,000 people. Operation Safe Homecoming, evacuated people from a civil war-like situation from Libya in 2011. All right. So various strategic operations have been conducted. Vande Bharat mission, we evacuated people, Indians stranded throughout the world during COVID-19 travel restrictions. All right. So these are strategic evacuation. Now अब आपको एक pattern नजर आने लगा कि these are also kinds of activities which India is involved in. For example, from Ukraine, we evacuated 21,000 citizens through Operation Ganga, right? So अपने आप आपकी एक लिस्ट बन गई. अब जो लिस्ट बनाना है ना, इस तरह की चीज़ों की लिस्ट बनाना है कि एक बार पढ़ लिया तो उसको कंसोलिडेट कर लो, राइट? क्योंकि ये अलग अलग डॉक्यूमेंट में अलग अलग जगह पे होगा, राइट? लेकिन अब आपको पता है कि स्ट्रैटेजिक इवैक्यूएशन हमको करना पड़ता है, राइट? वेरियस एग्जांपल्स हैव बीन गिवन. देवी शक्ति की बात कर ली हमने, 2593 की बात कर ली हमने, वेरियस सिक्योरिटी डायलॉग्स ऑफ द नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एडवाइजर, रीजनल सिक्योरिटी डायलॉग और SCO सिक्योरिटी डायलॉग. We have focused on Afghanistan, right? Beyond that, this content does not mean much, right? अब पढ़ लें 106 kilometers of border. This is where the border is. This is the Wakhan corridor of Afghanistan. What is special about this? Of course, we formally share a border with Afghanistan here, our smallest land border, but it is also the smallest land border of China. And Wakhan corridor you also see is shared with a border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. All right. So जिनको भी Central Asia, Afghanistan याद रखने में मुश्किल हो रही थी, कुछ तो याद होगा, right? That it is surrounded by a countries of South Asia, Pakistan, India, countries of Central Asia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all right, and countries of West Asia, Iran, right? So याद करना ही नहीं है, रिपीट करना है, लगातार रिपीट करना है, राइट? याद करने का जो आप लोगों ने ये प्रोजेक्ट उठाया हुआ है, इट्स अ सेल्फ डिफीटिंग प्रोजेक्ट. जिंदगी में कुछ याद हुआ, एग्जाम में जाके कुछ याद हुआ, भूल जाते थे ना, अनलेस you have something technical supporting it, like formulas, like algorithm जब आपको लिखना होता था, right? इस तरह की चीजें, क्योंकि उसका एक स्ट्रक्चर होता है, स्टेप बाय स्टेप, so you remember smaller things and thereby you remember the larger theorems, right? तो इसको भी वैसे ही बना लो, कुछ याद अगर करना है तो, but primary goal is not to remember, primary goal is to repeat, and through repetition what information is consistently coming up, that information should be very clear with you. राइट? ये कोई स्पेशल टैलेंट और स्पेशल एबिलिटी और स्पेशल इंफॉर्मेशन का एग्जाम नहीं है. ऑलराइट, इट्स अ डाउन राइट बोरिंग एग्जामिनेशन, राइट? और वहां पे ऐसे लोग आ गए हैं जिनका अटेंशन स्पैन इज लाइक अ स्पैरो. तो अब तो दिक्कत आएगी ही आएगी. उस पर तड़का लगा दो सोशल मीडिया का, राइट, विच बेसिकली इज डिस्ट्रॉइंग आवर अटेंशन स्पैन. आई डोंट नो व्हाट इज हैपनिंग, बट अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल आर सेइंग दैट दिस इज व्हाट इज हैपनिंग. इट्स एन इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट इन आवर इवोल्यूशन कि अब जब डिवाइसेस हमारे साथ एम्बेड हो गए हैं. ऑल राइट, सो जस्ट अंडरस्टैंड कि आपका चैलेंज अलग है. क्या है? पहले जो एस्पिरेंट थे उनका चैलेंज अलग था, उनको मटेरियल नहीं मिलता था, कोई नोट्स छुपा के रखता था. आपके पास बहुत ज्यादा है. ऑल राइट, ये प्रॉब्लम है. यू हैव प्रॉब्लम ऑफ प्लेंटी, एंड दैट प्रॉब्लम ऑफ प्लेंटी इज ओनली रिजॉल्व्ड बाय डिवाइजिंग योर ओन क्लासिफिकेशन मेथड्स, है ना? यही मशीन लर्निंग और चाहे ये बड़ा बड़ा जो भी लार्ज लैंग्वेज मॉड्यूल या जो भी होता है, ये सारे काम कर रहे हैं, डेटा जो भी है. तो अब आपको इतना काम नहीं करना, आपको क्रेडिट कार्ड नहीं बेचना. किसको क्रेडिट कार्ड की जरूरत है, टारगेट करो उसको, वो नहीं करना आपको केवल एग्जाम की तैयारी करनी है. तो थोड़ा इंटरनेट और सोशल मीडिया को लिमिट करिए, राइट? डॉक्यूमेंट पढ़िए. चलो ये हो गया. इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन तक हम जाते हैं. ट्रीटी ऑफ फ्रेंडशिप बिटवीन इंडिया एंड अफगानिस्तान वाज साइंड इन 1950, राइट? 49, करेक्ट, 49. मेजर एक्सपोर्ट क्या है, इसकी जरूरत नहीं है अब आपको. इंडिया अफगानिस्तान एयर फ्रेट कॉरिडोर operational in 2017. 2002 to 2021 India spent 4 billion, nearly 4 billion on various development projects. ये आपने देख लिया. अब इंडिया मॉलडीव्स पे आते हैं. इंडिया मॉलडीव्स क्यों न्यूज़ पे? बिकॉज वी साइंड वेरियस एग्रीमेंट्स. फिर से बहुत रेगुलर होता है. अब आगे चलते हैं. अब देखो मॉलडीव्स क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है. बिकॉज इट इज एशिया स्मॉलेस्ट कंट्री डेमोग्राफिकली, एशिया स्मॉलेस्ट कंट्री जियोग्राफिकली, बट इट्स लोकेशन इज वॉट मेक्स इट इंपॉर्टेंट. इट इज राइट अक्रॉस द 9-degree channel. All right, it is called the toll gate in the Indian Ocean, between the Eastern Indian Ocean and Western Indian Ocean. So meaning sea lanes of communication or trade routes are passing close to Maldives. All right, services sector, tourism is also a prominent area in Maldives, and climate change. Because of vulnerability of Maldives, because it is low lying, it makes Maldives an important participant in climate change negotiations. Right? We have enjoyed good relations with Maldives. Maldives became independent in 1965, right? Formally. And then we have had diplomatic relations and we enjoyed overall good relations with Maldives in all periods, right? So, 1988, we sent assistance to Maldives to safeguard the government of the day against a coup. All right, that is Operation Cactus. So that is example of how close our relations are. Similarly, 2004, in the aftermath of Indian Ocean tsunami, India was the first responder. All right, India assisted Maldives in dealing with that crisis. Okay. Secondly, if you see, 2014, Maldives relies on desalination plants. One of its desalination plants in Malé got destroyed. So India sent packaged water to Maldives. Right? So thereby, while Maldives is important because of its location, Maldives is important as a neighborhood first. Maldives is important in India's Sagar approach, security and growth for all in the region, which is India's Indian Ocean approach. India is also important for Maldives as the nearest largest country, as the first responder in the matters of crisis. There has been one period of friction in between India and Maldives, that is the period between 2010 to 2018. All right. So Maldives changed into a parliamentary democracy in 2007-8 when it adopted a constitution. Right. Now, in the parliamentary election, Mohammad Nasheed is elected. Mohammad Nasheed adopts a pro-India policy, but Mohammad Nasheed is removed. And when Mohammad Nasheed is removed, what we see is that India's projects like the GMR, which is an Indian conglomerate in the construction sector, in the logistics sector, it had won the project for building an airport in the capital of Maldives. वो project cancel कर दिया. So ये friction का period था, right? 2018 onwards, a new president comes into power, Ibrahim Soli, and when he came to power, he said India first, meaning India first is Maldives policy, and we say neighborhood first, and within neighborhood first, Maldives is a focus. What did we do? As we did earlier also, we provided development assistance to Maldives. So 2018, we announced 1.4 billion US dollars of assistance, which we are releasing in different tranches. What is the purpose? Development projects. One of the development projects which is being supported is Greater Malay Connectivity Project. All right, so we are building bridge, nearly twice the size of bridge that China had built. So that is symbolic, but we are building a bridge connecting various atolls, islands of Maldives. All right, इसमें 500 मिलियन पहले हमने लाइन ऑफ क्रेडिट दिया था, 100 मिलियन ग्रांट दिया था, अब फिर से रिन्यू किया है. सो ये कोई नई इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं है, बट दिस ओनली केटरिंग टू व्हाट एरियाज ऑफ एंगेजमेंट्स आर देयर. Right now, Maldives is part of Colombo Security Conclave. What is it? It's a maritime security dialogue. It started in 2011 as a trilateral maritime dialogue between India, Sri Lanka and Maldives. Now it has graduated into a larger dialogue with the participation of Mauritius also. Right? So Colombo Security Conclave simply is a dialogue, national security level, advisor level dialogue between Sri Lanka, Mauritius, India and Maldives. Right? National College for Policing and Law Enforcement, India's largest grant project in Maldives. ये केवल एग्जाम्पल है कि ये प्रोजेक्ट इससे बना है. डोंट वरी अबाउट इट. अब इंडिया आउट कैंपेन क्या है? तो सपोज वी कैन हाइपोथेटिकली थिंक ऑफ अ क्वेश्चन. द इंडिया आउट कैंपेन रिसेंटली इन न्यूज in the context of which country? Maldives. So what is it? So in any of the neighboring countries, political parties would find it expedient to criticize India because India is a large neighbor, and if you have any large friends, है ना, तो एक तो सेंस आता है थोड़ा सा डर का, right? A large country and a small country, there would be always apprehensions. इंडिया के अंदर भी जब मौका मिलता है तो हम पाकिस्तान और चाइना का नाम तो ले ही लेते हैं. So you understand, international relations somehow comes into domestic politics. So the opposition in Maldives right now, which is basically galvanizing around the previous president, Abdullah Yamin, is accusing the new government of basically handing over the interest of Maldives to India, right? Selling the interest of Maldives to India. So this is basically a political campaign. It's a domestic issue of Maldives. On these kinds of issues, we only say that India and Maldives need to tread with caution. All right, and India's position would always be कि डोमेस्टिक जो इश्यूज हैं वो डोमेस्टिक ही रहने चाहिए उन देशों में. ठीक है, तो इंडिया आउट कैंपेन ये है. चलिए, अब ये भी आप पढ़ लेंगे. सेकेंड लार्जेस्ट ट्रेडिंग पार्टनर मालदीव का, बायलैटरल ट्रेड कॉस्ट 3 मिलियन, मतलब बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं है. Maldives has a special place in India's neighborhood first policy. India Maldives resolved the politically contentious issues over Minicoy Island through their maritime boundary agreement in 1976. All right. And in 2016, India and Maldives signed a defense cooperation agreement or any other agreement. I don't know what is written here, क्योंकि आप देख सकते हैं मेरा आपके टेक्स्ट में दिया हुआ है. What is written there? Comprehensive for डिफेंस. हाँ, वो यामीन साहब का टाइम था, कुछ ज़्यादा आगे उसके हुआ नहीं. राइट, वो डिफेंस कोऑपरेशन का एक एग्रीमेंट है. चलो, एक्वेरिन क्या है? इट्स अ मेजर जॉइंट मिलिट्री एक्सरसाइज बिटवीन इंडिया एंड मालदीव्स. बांग्लादेश और इंडिया के बीच में क्या है मेजर मिलिट्री एक्सरसाइज? संप्रीति. इंडिया एंड श्रीलंका के बीच क्या है मेजर मिलिट्री एक्सरसाइज? मित्र शक्ति. ऑल राइट, मित्र शक्ति. एंड ऑल्सो स्लीनेक्स, नेवल एक्सरसाइज. ठीक है, चलो, तो ये आपने देख लिया. यहाँ पे दो तीन चीजें और देख लो. मालदीव्स ऑफ कोर्स इज हियर, दिस इज लक्षद्वीप. this is Seychelles. Right now we are talking about Southwest Indian Ocean region. This is Chagos Archipelago, this is Mauritius. Right, this is Madagascar. So now what you see is Chagos Archipelago was in news because of a case at ICJ. Chagos was part of Mauritius. Mauritius was controlled by the Britishers. When the Britishers left Mauritius, they separated Chagos from Mauritius and they handed over one part of it, which is Diego Garcia, the military base of US, to the US. Now the IC and उस प्रोजेक्ट के लिए क्या किया, इंडिजिनस वहाँ जितने लोग थे उनको भी निकाल दिया, राइट? तो अब जाके ये केस हुआ और इसमें आईसीजे ने कहा कि what UK did was wrong, all right, and Chagos should be returned to Mauritius. पर इतने आसानी से केवल आईसीजे ने कह दिया इसलिए हो जाएगा, ऐसा नहीं होता इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस में, राइट? तो इसलिए ये न्यूज में था. Seychelles, because India is interested in building maritime infrastructure in Seychelles. All right, and in Mauritius also India is interested in building maritime infrastructure. So there are two islands here which are important, Agalega Islands and Assumption Islands. All right, Agalega Islands and Assumption Islands. ठीक है, तो इंडिया का इन्वॉल्वमेंट है तो लोकेशन पे भी हम थोड़ा ध्यान दे लेंगे, राइट? बाकी ये न्यूज में तो होता ही है. अब अदर इंपॉर्टेंट न्यूज, इसमें मेरी आपको सलाह है कि आप खुद से पढ़ें, राइट? ये किस तरह के क्वेश्चन लाएगा ये. Now this information, simply understand, is good enough only to produce questions like this recently in news is associated with, or who are the participants in this. फिर भी एक बार बहुत तेजी से चलते हैं. ट्रांस हिमालयन मल्टी डायमेंशनल कनेक्टिविटी नेटवर्क, व्हाट इज दिस? जैसे CPEC है, व्हाट इज CPEC? CPEC is a part of BRI, a collection of connectivity and infrastructure projects China is financing in Pakistan. Similarly, China has proposed this involving Nepal, Trans-Himalayan Multi-Dimensional Connectivity Network, right? Rail connectivity, road connectivity, broadband connectivity China has already cracked. पहले इंडिया की मोनोपोली थी, अब China is also providing broadband to Nepal. But building road or rail would be difficult because geography is very difficult on their side, right? But still this plan is there. Nepal says that it basically would enhance the utility of its location. Suppose in the future there is peace between India and China, and these are two large trading countries. So one mode of trade would be through the Nepalese route. All right. So that is basically how Nepal is seeing it. But since it is in our neighborhood and we have apprehensions regarding China, we have an example of the CPEC. So we are basically concerned about it. We are watchful about it. Right now it is not much. Right now it is only at the level of intent. But we know, जब तिब्बत में रेलवे बन रहा था तब भी बहुत सारे लोग कह रहे थे कि इतनी ऊंचाई पर रेल बनाना मुश्किल काम है, नहीं बन सकता. चाइना डिड इट. ऑलराइट, सो दैट ओनली गिव्स अस वन लेसन. बिफोर चाइना डज इट, यू डू इट. ऑलराइट, यू इंप्लीमेंट द कनेक्टिविटी प्रोजेक्ट सो दैट नेपाल firmly remains on your side, right? Because geography dictates it, culture dictates it, history dictates it. Now you cement it through connectivity projects. Global security initiative क्या है? So basically you see, when we discuss security, most often we have a West-centric view. क्यों? Because you know English language. You know English language, you start thinking कि global content is available to us. But you have not been taught to ask this question, where is this content coming from? Who is writing it? What would be the intent? What kind of nature of relation is there between where this knowledge is being produced or to whom this knowledge is targeted? ये आप कभी नहीं सोचते, है ना? So this is why becoming educated is a lifelong process. You can become literate quite easily, but becoming educated is a constant process, right? Because there is no end to knowledge. So you see, now China is emerging. So far, the security concepts like collective security, all right, or collective defense, represented in arrangements like NATO, all right, even the structuring of Security Council, they have all the imprint of the West. So China's emergence is also a material emergence of China in economic terms, historical emergence of China, as Xi Jinping says, a century of humiliation, never again. Strategic emergence of China when it is now spending the money that it has in modernization, military modernization and technological modernization, right? You will see that's why semiconductor race is heating up, because that is the last piece of the puzzle for all the advanced communications, avionics systems, weapon systems. और ये जो market है बहुत ही closely controlled है by the West, all right? Most of their foundries or factories are either controlled by Dutch companies or are in Germany, and certainly they are US allies. तो ये competition है. तो अब इस competition में there would be another aspect, ideas. So if you see, US always talks about saving the world. US की movies देख लो. US का मूवी का हर हीरो अमेरिका के किसी शहर को नहीं बचा रहा, वो दुनिया को बचा रहा है, यूनिवर्स को बचा रहा है. उनके जो भी मार्वल सीरीज ऑफ जो वो है उसमें वो यूनिवर्स को बचा रहे हैं. सो दैट इज प्रोपेगेंडा ऑफ हाई क्लास विच यू डोंट सी बिकॉज यू सी इट एज एंटरटेनमेंट. एंड नाउ अब इसका नुकसान क्या है, अब एजुकेशन को भी सब एंटरटेनमेंट के रूप में चाहते हैं. फिर कुछ दिन में क्या होगा, एंटरटेनमेंट, राइट. तो एंटरटेनमेंट का कौन बना रहा है वो आपको कंट्रोल करेगा, क्योंकि आपको केवल एंटरटेनमेंट चाहिए. सो देखो, तो ये साथ में जाता है. व्हेन यू आर राइजिंग एज अ पावर, योर आइडियाज, यू ट्राई टू शेप द आइडियाज. तो ये चाइना का अटेम्प्ट टू शेप द आइडियाज. सो नाउ चाइना इज सेइंग दैट वी नीड टू डिस्कस अ न्यू कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ सिक्योरिटी, राइट, which is what it is called global security initiative. 2022 में शी जिनपिंग के इस आइडिया को चाइनीज कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी की कांग्रेस ने एक्सेप्ट किया. 2023 अभी मार्च के महीने में इसके बारे में और कुछ डिटेल्ड डॉक्यूमेंट चाइना ने निकाले हैं. सो इट्स सिंपली चाइनाज आइडिया, चाइनाज कॉम्पीटिंग आइडिया, राइट. नाउ चाइना वुड लाइक टू अट्रैक्ट अदर कंट्रीज कि आओ बस इस आइडिया को सपोर्ट करो. वंस दिस स्टार्ट्स हैपनिंग, पोलराइजेशन वुड बी क्लियरर between another east and another west, just as it was the case in the Cold War period, right. So remember, Cold War was an ideological competition but also a material competition, all right. It was both. तो ये जो बात है वो आपको अभी भी दिख रही है. तो ये क्या आइडिया है भैया? According to China, new global security initiative will work against the Cold War military hegemonism, power politics, bloc confrontation, जो मैंने आपको बताया, the older traditional West-centric concentration. It will also counter US Indo-Pacific strategy, Quad. So basically, China views Quad or terms Quad as the Asian NATO, all right, and it views Indo-Pacific as a divisive term being used by US to sow dissension, divide within Asian countries. ये चाइना और रशिया का व्यू है, right? So that's why it is in news. That's why it would only produce questions like global security initiative is associated with, right? इंडिया का कोई लेना देना नहीं है इससे. पॉर्क्यूपाइन स्ट्रैटेजी, अब ये वो पार्ट है आईआर का जिसमें सबको इंटरेस्ट होता है और मुझको सबसे कम इंटरेस्ट है, बिकॉज दिस इज नथिंग बट एंटरटेनमेंट. कि किसी ने कह दिया पॉर्क्यूपाइन स्ट्रैटेजी, उसमें बहुत सारे वीडियोस हैं. मतलब क्या है पॉर्क्यूपाइन स्ट्रैटेजी, क्या है पॉर्क्यूपाइन, कैसे अपने को डिफेंड करता है, कैसे डिफेंड करता है? उसके शरीर पे कांटे होते हैं, आप उसके पास नहीं जा सकते. इफ द प्रेडेटर tries to kill a porcupine, it first has to deal with those spines of porcupine or thorns of porcupine. तो ये strategy, मतलब multi-level strategy. First of all, you know that China is a superior power, but where is China weak? So China and Taiwan are separated by the Taiwan channel. So one limitation of China would be crossing this channel. So defense preparedness here, राइट. सबमरीन से कर लो, स्पेशल कमांडोज बना के कर लो, है ना. दूसरा, ऑन चाइना को लैंड करना पड़ेगा, राइट, टू कंट्रोल ताइवान, राइट. सो ऑन द लैंड, राइट, स्पेशली इन द कोस्टल रीजन, वो आपका डिफेंसिव फॉर्मेशन, एंड देन यूजिंग द टोपोग्राफी, टेरेन, माउंटेनस टेरेन ऑफ ताइवान. सो इतने लेयर्स में आप डिफेंस तैयार करो. और बेसिकली आपकी स्ट्रैटेजी डिफेंसिव ही हो सकती है चाइना के अगेंस्ट, बिकॉज चाइना इज अ लार्जर पावर. इट वुड ऑलवेज बी अ वॉरफेयर बिटवीन टू अनइक्वल्स, जैसे यूक्रेन एंड रशिया. सो यूक्रेन कैन नॉट डू द सेम थिंग एज रशिया इज डूइंग बिकॉज देयर इज पावर असिमेट्री. इसी को कहते हैं असिमेट्रिक वॉरफेयर एट टाइम्स. सो व्हाट डू यू सी इज हैपनिंग? ए मे बी some innovation would take place, maybe newer devices like drones, unmanned aerial vehicles would be useful here. So ये porcupine strategy आप खुद से पढ़ लीजिएगा, शायद कोई वीडियो भी बना चुका होगा. जहाँ तक मुझे याद है कि ये बहुत सारे वीडियोस में आता भी है, ठीक है. अब स्पेक्ट्रोग्राफिक इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑफ नेबुलर गैस प्रोजेक्ट, अब ये साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी में जा रहे हैं, ठीक है. आईआर के हिसाब से क्या है? ए, टेंशंस बिटवीन इंडिया एंड चाइना, भूल जाओ इस बात को. सिंग प्रोजेक्ट क्या है? So it's a collaboration between Indian Institute of Astronomy and Russian Academy of Sciences for designing payloads for Tiangong. What is Tiangong? It is the latest international space station of China. तो क्वेश्चन कैसे आएंगे? Since there is a tangential involvement of India, this term mentioned in news is, ये क्या है? All right? तो क्वेश्चन देखो ये, अब ये वुल्फ वॉरियर डिप्लोमेसी, इस पे बहुत सारे लोग सवाल पूछते हैं, क्या है वुल्फ वॉरियर? सो पहले तो एक सिनेमा का कैरेक्टर है वुल्फ वॉरियर. ऑल राइट, अब आपने रिसेंटली देखा होगा दैट द मार्वल यूनिवर्स इज ऑल्सो इंट्रोड्यूसिंग चाइनीज कैरेक्टर्स. पहला तो इसमें साफ साफ बाजार है ना, सिनेमा का बाजार, कल्चर का बाजार, कल्चरल प्रोडक्शन का बाजार. तो चाइना एक बहुत बड़ा मार्केट है, तो आपको चाइना के हीरोज तो दिखाने पड़ेंगे. अब सारे हीरो जो है अमेरिका के, पहले तो सारे के सारे हीरो जो है एक ही रेशियल ग्रुप के थे, यानी कि एंग्लो सेक्शन वाइट मेल. ऑल राइट, अब थोड़ा उन्होंने ब्लैक हीरोज भी बनाना शुरू कर दिया, तो चाइनीज हीरो भी बना रहे हैं. ये कल्चरल प्रोडक्शन है, ये आपकी इमेज, आपकी रीच को आगे बढ़ाता है एंड मेक्स यू मोर एक्सेप्टेबल. तो चाइना क्यों पीछे रहेगा? अब चाइना की कमजोरी ये है कि वो चाइनीज लैंग्वेज बड़ी मुश्किल है, अंग्रेजी की तरह आसान नहीं है. चाइनीज लैंग्वेज बड़ी मुश्किल लैंग्वेज है, यू कैनॉट लर्न इट वेरी इजिली. एट माई एज ऑफकोर्स आई एम फाइंडिंग इट वेरी डिफिकल्ट, बहुत मुश्किल है. तो पहला तो वो औरों तक इतनी आसानी से नहीं पहुंच सकते. तो औरों तक पहुंचने का तरीका क्या होता है आपका? डिप्लोमेसी. राइट, आपके जो एम्बेसडर्स होते हैं, आपका जो डिप्लोमेट होता है, आपके लिए बात करता है. जब हम पढ़ते तो हमको ये बताया जाता था बहुत ही लाइटर वेन में कि डिप्लोमेट्स आर प्रोफेशनल्स पेड टू लाई फॉर देयर कंट्री. ऑल राइट, लाई मतलब झूठ बोलना. ट्रू, बुरा मानने की बात नहीं है. So now what kind of diplomacy? You have Western model of diplomacy, right? Talks, negotiations, etc., etc. There is an Indian model also. हम बहुत ही difficult negotiator माने जाते हैं. India is considered to be a very difficult negotiator. All right? ये आज की बात नहीं है, ये हमेशा से ऐसा है, right? At WTO negotiations, at free trade agreement negotiations. So every country has a diplomatic style. China's diplomatic style is closely associated with People's Liberation Army, because China became a state after a revolution, following a war, civil war. So rather than learning the nuances of diplomacy being nice, there is another way of diplomacy which can be aggressive in posturing, in words, but also in action. Now that is what China is doing in order to convey its seriousness on certain matters. Its diplomats sometimes come across as aggressive and abrasive. So ये है wolf warrior diplomacy, right? A particular form of diplomacy where China is not shying away from using coercive diplomacy. राइट, और वुल्फ वॉरियर जो उनका कैरेक्टर है वो ठीक वैसा ही जैसे अमेरिकन कैरेक्टर होते थे पहले, जॉन रैम्बो. ऑल राइट, उसके बाद बहुत सारे कैरेक्टर आए जो दुनिया में जाके लोगों को बचा रहे. तो इनका जो वुल्फ वॉरियर कैरेक्टर है वो दुनिया भर में जाके चाइनीज को बचाता है. ऑल राइट, सो दैट ही इज ऑल्सो दैट काइंड ऑफ अ सुपर हीरो. सो दैट टर्म कम्स फ्रॉम देयर एंड इट इज अबाउट सर्टेन स्टैंस ऑफ डिप्लोमैटिक प्रैक्टिस विच इज विजिबल इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ चाइना. ये ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है. एशियन क्लियरिंग यूनियन अक्सर न्यूज़ में रहा है बिकॉज one support that we provided Sri Lanka was differing the payment through ACU channel, right? So ACU क्या है? So trade payments or payments generally take place through banking channels. So very broadly, simply understand it's a banking channel. For what purpose? For facilitating trade and other transactions. What kind of transactions? So depending on what organization it is, it would designate some transactions as eligible transaction. So for example, trade related transaction or such transactions which have been not expressly prohibited within that particular country. So mainly trade related transactions are cleared through this. So what is the benefit? So basically what is happening is that some countries are coming together and they are creating this kind of a mechanism, right? So basically it is governed through central banks, right? Like for example in India, RBI would be nodal authority for these kinds of activities, right? Currency swap arrangement or Asian clearing union. So these central banks come together and acts as a consortium, right? So they basically, if you see their economies, they are backed by these economies, right? So now you have pooled resources. So within this channel, multilateral transactions can take place, credits can be provided, countries can save valuable foreign exchange, all right, and transaction cost which is involved. So it is limited to the countries which are part of it. And who are part of Asian Clearing Union? All countries of South Asia, barring Afghanistan, all right, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Bangladesh एक बार बोल दिया मैंने, श्रीलंका. So all countries of South Asia barring अफगानिस्तान. अफगानिस्तान नहीं है. इसके अलावा म्यांमार, नेपाल, ऑलराइट, म्यांमार एंड ईरान, ये इसके पार्ट हैं। लोकेटेड कहाँ पे है करेंटली? तेहरान, ऑलराइट। सो बेसिकली ये एक चैनल है, ये चीज ठीक है, इसको पढ़ लेना थोड़ा ध्यान से। सो आरबीआई अनाउंस दैट ऑल एलिजिबल करंट अकाउंट ट्रांजैक्शंस इंक्लूडिंग ट्रेड ट्रांजैक्शंस विद श्रीलंका मे बी सेटल्ड इन एनी परमिटेड करेंसी आउटसाइड द एशियन क्लियरिंग यूनियन, right? So we are trying to go out of our way to facilitate some form of economic ease for Sri Lanka. अब ACU was established in 1974. ये UN escape क्या है? So UN ECOSOC is primarily responsible for economic, social, cultural, scientific, technical issues and coordination among different countries within the UN. But इसके बहुत सारे regional bodies भी हैं, all right? So ये उसी तरह का एक रीजनल बॉडी है, यूनाइटेड नेशंस इकोनॉमिक एंड सोशल काउंसिल फॉर एशिया पैसिफिक, राइट? सो थ्रू इट्स फैसिलिटेशन दीज कंट्रीज केम टुगेदर एंड फॉर्म दिस पर्टिकुलर यूनियन, राइट? ऑब्जेक्टिव इज टू फैसिलिटेट पेमेंट्स अमंग मेंबर कंट्रीज फॉर एलिजिबल ट्रांजैक्शंस। ये हर मैकेनिज्म के अंदर एक लिस्ट होगी किस तरह का ट्रांजैक्शन ऑन अ मल्टीलैटरल बेसिस, मीनिंग ये सारे देश इस ट्रांजैक्शन को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, ऑलराइट। एक देश को पैसे की जरूरत हुई तो दूसरा देश दे सकता है, या अपने फॉरेन करेंसीज रिजर्व से हेल्प कर सकता है ना? किस लिए? थोड़े समय के लिए, ज्यादा समय के लिए नहीं, राइट? ताकि पैसा अटके नहीं, किसका? ट्रेडर्स का, ठीक है? तो ये है अब जो एशियन मॉनिटरी यूनिट है, ये क्या है? इट्स अ द यूनिट ऑफ अकाउंट ऑफ द एशियन क्लियरिंग यूनियन। अब ये किन करेंसीज पे बेस्ड है? तो नाम बता रहा है, एसीयू डॉलर, एसीयू यूरो, एसीयू येन, ऑलराइट। जैसे आईएमएफ का यूनिट ऑफ अकाउंट क्या है? व्हाट इज द यूनिट ऑफ अकाउंट ऑफ आईएमएफ? एसडीआर, ऑलराइट। एसडीआर इज नथिंग बट यूनिट ऑफ अकाउंट, एंड एसडीआर इज ऑल्सो बेस्ड ऑन द बास्केट ऑफ वेटेड एवरेज ऑफ द करेंसीज विच आर पार्ट ऑफ दैट बास्केट, राइट? यूएस डॉलर, पाउंड स्टर्लिंग, यूरो and also yen and now renminbi, all right? So ये क्योंकि आपकी टेक्निकल नॉलेज में थोड़ा सा ऐड करता है, तो इसलिए दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट, अदरवाइज रेस्ट ऑफ द इंफॉर्मेशन इज नॉट ऑफ मच वैल्यू, पर एक बार पढ़ लो, राइट? प्लेसेस इन न्यूज, अगेन ये मैं आपको नहीं कराने जा रहा क्योंकि मैंने जगह जगह पे मेंशन कर दिया। दूसरा ये देखो यहाँ पे एक्सप्लेन्ड है, ठीक है? सो इन द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ टाइम, अनलेस आपको इसको पढ़ने के बाद, फॉर एग्जाम्पल कुछ चीज़ों को मैंने कवर किया, जैसे पांगोंग सो लेक मैंने पहले ही आपको निकाल के बताया। अब डीबीएस रोड, ये सारे रोड वोड नहीं आने वाले, और पेट्रोलिंग पॉइंट्स, इस तरह के क्वेश्चंस नहीं आने वाले, राइट? मैंने इसका कारण भी कल आपको बताया था। बट पासेस, डोंट यू थिंक पासेस आर वेरी कंसिस्टेंट काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस? ज्योग्राफी में भी लॉजिक बनता है, ऑलराइट? इंडिया के अंदर प्रोमिनेंट पासेस, हिमालयन पासेस, और इसी तरह से कुछ ट्रांसबाउंड्री पासेस, ऑलराइट? जैसे कि हमने चाइना के साथ क्या देखा अभी, कौन सा पास? लिपू लेक पास, ऑलराइट? तो ये लिस्ट बना सकते हो आप, राइट? ये लिस्ट आप बना सकते हो, क्योंकि ये जो लिस्ट है ये बहुत ज्यादा काम आएगी, इट वुड हैव मल्टीपल यूसेज, राइट? चलो आगे चलते हैं। अब आ गए हम इंडिया एंड साउथ ईस्ट एशिया। जब मैंने बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन आपको दिखाए तो साउथ ईस्ट एशिया का बहुत सारा एस्पेक्ट हमने कवर किया था, राइट? अब ये किस लिए न्यूज में? म्यांमार, मलेशिया, इंडिया, सिंगापुर ट्रांजिट कॉरिडोर, ये क्या है? It has been proposed. Why has it been proposed? Because it's geographically tenable. Why? Because two things we share, all these countries share the continental landmass, all right, but also the maritime domain, Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, all right? तो ये geography पे based है। कनेक्टिविटी के बारे में बात करें, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरमेंट, फॉरेस्ट एंड क्लाइमेट चेंज हैज सजेस्टेड टू क्रिएट म्यांमार, मलेशिया, इंडिया, सिंगापुर ट्रांजिट कॉरिडोर इन चेन्नई फॉर कोस्टल रेगुलेशन जोन क्लियरेंस, ऑलराइट? सो इट्स बेसिकली प्रपोजिंग a new form of cooperation between India and these countries. So what is MIST? अब पढ़ने के लिए इसलिए बोलता हूँ, अगला एक्सप्लेनेशन है, MIST is an international submarine cable communication network to connect India with Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia and Singapore. It's a prominent example of connectivity. What kind of connectivity? Now it would promote digital connectivity, right? So ये idea क्यों है? क्योंकि we have contiguous geography, right? It has only been proposed, तो इसकी total length 8,100 किलोमीटर होगी. What kind of question would it produce? A, first of all, what is MIST? क्या है ये? तो सिंपल आंसर है इट्स अ प्रपोज्ड सबमरीन केबल प्रोजेक्ट. दूसरा, which countries are involved under this, right? So that is the information that you should be looking at. Now let's look at India and Myanmar. So why Myanmar? Because it's the starting point of Southeast Asia for us. It is the only Southeast Asian country with which we share a land border. All right, land border. We share maritime border with Myanmar as well. All right, we share maritime border with boundaries with Indonesia and Thailand as well. All right, in the Bay of Bengal. So they are our maritime neighbors. They are part of our extended neighborhood also. They are focus of our Act East policy. This is the region that we are talking about, and it produces a lot of questions in the preliminary examination, mainly location based question, or you have seen which of the organizations India is a member of. So what about Myanmar? First of all, 1643 kilometer long border. We have resolved our border issues with Myanmar by signing a border agreement in the 1960s itself, right? At some point, some states at the local level, there may be some issues of demarcation or actual location of pillar, but officially at the level of agreement, there is no problem between us. Now, when you look at this boundary, it is shared between some of the sensitive states in India, Arunachal Pradesh, all right, or Nagaland, or Manipur, right, or Mizoram. So if you see these kinds of states, one of the primary problems is that these states are landlocked. So thereby any country surrounding them is important for access, for connectivity. Second thing is these states have faced insurgency, security problem, and one aspect of managing insurgency is cooperation from other side of the border, right? Because insurgency has links on both sides. For example, insurgents carry out activities in India and cross over, taking advantage of the porous terrain into Myanmar. So if you have good relations with Myanmar, it would be helpful in connectivity. It would be helpful in stabilizing the Northeast. It would be helpful in transforming the access of Northeast to open sea, but also India Southeast Asia trade, right? So geography has a lot to tell you. So if you look at Myanmar, its new capital is Naypyidaw, but traditionally its capital has been Yangon. It has a coast in the Bay of Bengal. It shares Andaman Sea with India, and if you see Andaman Nicobar Islands, one of their prominent axis is the submergence of Arakan Yoma. All right. So that is where you see geographically we are part of the same landmass. Politically we may be different countries. This is Thailand. Again, in Andaman Sea we have a maritime boundary with it. So देखें फिर और क्या लिखा हुआ है? $2 billion of trade, of course, because for a long time Myanmar was a closed country. Opening up of Myanmar is an event of 2010 when Myanmar first put in place a new constitution and conducted elections. So since then we have got more opportunity to open up and engage with Myanmar. $2 billion of trade, around the same quantum of development assistance that we have provided. And again, if you see this development assistance, where is it going? It's going in border development programs in Myanmar. In what areas? Where the Nagas also live. So Naga is an ethnicity which is shared between India and Myanmar. Right? So those kinds of projects. What other kinds of projects? If you see Kaladan multimodal transit project, entirely implemented by India's grant in aid, 4,000 crores of grant in aid. Right? Then you have the trilateral highway project. It's a highway which aims to connect Thailand, Myanmar and India. All right? Both of them were conceptualized in the same time frame, 2003-4. Right? Both of them were supposed to be completed by 2020, 2022. Both of them are not complete. Right? And Rakhine State Development Program, मतलब Rakhine कहाँ पे है? ये है Rakhine province. All right? Why is Rakhine in news? For two reasons. One terminus, which is the Sittwe port of the Kaladan multimodal project, is in Rakhine province. Two, Rohingyas, who have been in news because of humanitarian concerns, refugee issues, also originate from the Rakhine province. All right. So when there is a conflict, other countries ask for our help. For example, Bangladesh would ask for our help in the case of Rohingya crisis, because largest number of Rohingya refugees are in Bangladesh, close to 600,000 to 1 million refugees. So what we did was we provided help to Bangladesh under Operation Insaniyat, Project Insaniyat, basically supplies to manage the refugee population there. And to Myanmar, we provided government to government support of 25 million US dollars to basically ensure socio-economic development in the Rakhine province. Why? Because we understand that ultimately it has to be negotiation between these two countries. We don't have a direct role, but we can provide them indirect support. And what is India's position on the Rohingya crisis? It has been that safe, secure and sustained return of Rohingya refugees to their homes is the solution. Alright, this is what India supports clearly. How should this happen is something that India is not going to prescribe, because that is not India's policy. Right? That is the position that you understand, right, about this. And then both countries are members of multilateral organizations like BIMSTEC, ASEAN Regional Forum, Mekong Ganga Cooperation, MGC, UN, WTO. आते हैं इन पे भी. इंडिया वियतनाम भी थोड़ा सा कर लेते हैं. लास्ट ईयर इंडिया वियतनाम पे क्वेश्चन आ गया था, आप देख चुके हैं. बहुत फिर से न्यूज़ क्यों, बहुत सारे एग्रीमेंट साइन किए. कौन सा एग्रीमेंट साइन किया? तो अब वियतनाम के साथ हमने साइन किया लॉजिस्टिक्स सपोर्ट एग्रीमेंट. ऑलराइट, so there are various logistics support agreements that we have signed. Logistics support agreements are basically military agreements to ensure access to each other's logistics between interested countries. Alright, so see, one logistics agreement is what America and its allies sign. So that is more comprehensive, right? That is for all purposes, including launching war or war related efforts. These kinds of logistics sharing agreement are always limited. The logistics sharing agreement that India signs, they are only for designated purposes and they are only applicable to designated facilities. What are the designated purposes? The designated purposes generally are referred to as refueling, recreation, repair, refurbishing. Right? For example, a ship of India is there close by, it needs help, it can go and dock in a port of Vietnam, it would receive help. Right? And what other designated purposes? So occasions. For example, port call. When a ship is visiting Vietnam or Vietnamese ship is visiting India, right? On a normal course of visit, right? Friendly visit. इसको कहते हैं port call. जब किसी दूसरे देश का ship आपके port पे रुकता है, making a friendly call. और humanitarian assistance, disaster relief kind of operations, जहाँ पे दोनों देशों को आपस में काम करने की जरूरत हो. और इसके अलावा military exercises, when naval exercises are taking place. So this is what the nature of logistics support agreement is. A, it involves sharing of logistics for designated purposes. B, it creates further cooperation between the defense establishment of both sides. Mainly, apart from along with the exercises that we conduct, these kinds of activities also promote what is called interoperability, meaning ability to work together, right? And of course, this kind of a step is also an example of deepening of strategic ties. So that's why it came into news. यहाँ आपको explain किया हुआ है उस language में और कुछ देशों का नाम दिया हुआ है, ये आप देख लेना. So we have Vietnam as an important partner. We have a strategic partnership with Vietnam. We have a defense partnership, a vision towards 2030. It means that strategically Vietnam-India defense cooperation is something on the horizon. A, Vietnam can buy BrahMos or Akash or other weapon system that we have. B, Vietnam is a neighbor of China with whom it does not have very cordial relations, right? But it also is very true. Like India, Vietnam also has significant trade with China. So equation is always more complicated. We have provided $500 million line of credit to Vietnam for defense procurement from us. We are engaged in cultural engagement with Vietnam also, because some parts of Southeast Asia are very prominently linked culturally with India, like with the case of Myanmar, Thailand, all right. But some parts of Southeast Asia, we need to work more, like with Vietnam. All right, with Vietnam, this Indic element of civilizational stream is something that we need to work, revive more on. Because Southeast Asia is basically a combination of three civilizational streams. One is, of course, indigenous, the local people. Another is the Chinese stream of civilization. And the second one is the Indian stream of civilization. So, of course, we have cultural commonality. One is Trang Quoc Pagoda, which basically was visited by the defense minister, right? चलो आगे चलते हैं. ये आप खुद से पढ़ लें तो बेहतर होगा. अब हम चलते हैं towards the slide, right? कुछ रिवाइज कर लेंगे, कुछ क्वेश्चंस देख लेंगे. मिनी कॉय, right? आएंगे, क्वेश्चन पे आएंगे, right? मिनी कॉय, मेंशन हुआ था, ठीक है, तो अपने देश का है तो थोड़ा ज्यादा जानना चाहिए, ठीक। सो मिनिकॉय इज एन आइलैंड, southern part of Lakshadweep, right? Southern part of Lakshadweep. So if you see, its location is north of 9-degree channel, right? Between 9 and 10-degree channels. The closest island to Minicoy is the Thurakunu Island, which is in Maldives. ठीक है? अब इस island की history ये है कि there was a plebiscite conducted in 1956. Of course, Britishers left. So there are a lot of territories about which you know. For example, you know about Kashmir, Hyderabad, Junagadh, etc. But you basically don't know the history of how the territorial composition of India was actually shaped. So यहाँ पे फिर ये बन गया एक union territory इंडिया का, right? At that point in time, the union territory was named as Lakadweep, Minicoy and Amandivi, right? ये union territory थी. अब बाद में इस union territory का नाम लक्षद्वीप हो गया, right? Has Lakshadweep been in news? Yes, because of the debate about how much development, strategic significance of Lakshadweep, क्या करना चाहिए उसके साथ, right? In December 1976, India and Maldives signed a maritime boundary treaty whereby Minicoy was placed on Indian side of the boundary. Just as with Sri Lanka, we had a maritime boundary agreement in 1974, which put Kachativu on Sri Lankan side. Right? These are all matters of negotiation on what you agree, because Lakshadweep also, Maldives also claimed, because of the geographical proximity, that Minicoy should belong to it. But now it has been resolved through that agreement. ये पढ़ा आपने? ठीक है, चलो आगे चले. अब ये साउथ ईस्ट एशिया का मैप है, राइट. ए, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी ऑलरेडी नो द स्टेट शेयरिंग बॉर्डर विथ म्यांमार, विच इज इंडियाज गेटवे टू साउथ ईस्ट एशिया. नाउ लुक एट द रिवर्स. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल दिस इज ब्रह्मपुत्र, जिसके बारे में मैंने आपको कहा कि आप पढ़ें. इट इज मेकिंग अ सिंटेक्सियल बेंड हियर, राइट, एन अब्रप्ट टर्न. एक और रिवर ट्रिब्यूटन प्लेटू से आ रहा है, इरावदी. इरावदी इज शेयर्ड बिटवीन चाइना एंड म्यांमार. इरावदी empties into the Andaman Sea. This is the Coco Channel, which separates India's Andaman Islands from the Coco Island of Myanmar, right? So Irrawaddy empties into the Andaman Sea. There is another river. This is Mekong. Mekong originates in China. It then flows into the border, forms the border between China and Myanmar, then Laos and Myanmar, and then flows through the border point of Thailand and Myanmar also. Then it flows into Laos, then it forms the border between Laos and Thailand, that it enters into Cambodia, and then it empties into South China Sea. All right, UPSC very regularly asks questions of rivers, their course. तो इसमें भी रूल यही है कि सब याद करना है क्या, ये सवाल ही नहीं है. कुछ तो पढ़ लो, कुछ तो याद होगा, and then you apply your elimination method, etc. Right? So this is the Andaman Sea. Now you see this is 10-degree channel. 10-degree channel separates Andaman from Nicobar. Now this is the Great Channel or 6-degree channel. All right, Great Channel or 6-degree channel. This separates Indonesia. This is the island of Sumatra of Indonesia from India. Right. So we are very close neighbors. Right. This is the Strait of Malacca, connects the Andaman Sea, Bay of Bengal with South China Sea. All right. तो इतना तो आपको जानना चाहिए. Second thing, you make a list of the capitals. So the capital Naypyidaw or Yangon of Myanmar, Thailand's Bangkok, Laos Vientiane, Hanoi is the capital of Vietnam, Phnom Penh capital of Cambodia, Kuala Lumpur Malay Peninsula capital of Malaysia. At the tip of Malay Peninsula is Singapore. All right. The capital of Indonesia is Jakarta, which is on the island of Java. All right, next to the island of Java is the small island of Bali. This is the island of Borneo. On Borneo, you have one part Indonesia, one part Malaysia. At the tip of it is Brunei. All right, the capital Bandar Seri Begawan. And this is Manila, another archipelagic country and a country which is a maritime country in Southeast Asia. Some countries are continental. This is continental Southeast Asia. This is maritime Southeast Asia, right? And now, if you want, if you are interested, you can go into other areas. For example, this is East Timor, the newest country of Southeast Asia, came out of Indonesia. 1999, capital is Dili. This is the Timor Sea between East Timor and Australia, right? Now, if you go up, we have talked about the island chain strategies. So you see, these are the islands that we are talking about, right? If you see, they are all around China, and if you see, they are all around the path, important pathways in the Pacific, right? This is Taiwan, Taiwan Strait, this is Hong Kong, this is Macau, and this is the Ji River. This is East China Sea. If you go further up, Yellow Sea. If you go towards Japan and Korea, there is Sea of Japan, which is also called East Sea. East Sea and East China Sea are different, right? Depending आपका कितना interest है, आप चले जाओ इसमें. South China Sea, always in news, surrounded by China to the north, countries of Southeast Asia on all the other sides. Known for various disputes, mainly over major features here. Paracel Islands, Spratly Island, certainly you should remember, because these are two of the largest geographical features in South China Sea. उसके आगे आपकी मर्जी, ये अक्सर न्यूज़ में आता रहता है, राइट? तो ये पहला. दूसरा, ये सवाल देख लो, 10 डिग्री चैनल सेपरेट करता है किसको? अंडमान एंड निकोबार. आर दीज वेरी डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चंस? नहीं, क्योंकि आपकी तैयारी किसी और डायरेक्शन में चल रही थी. जब आप इसको एग्जाम में देखते हैं तो अक्सर आप कंफ्यूज हो जाते हैं, है ना, कि ये तो याद ही नहीं रहा, ये मैं तो मुश्किल मुश्किल चीज़ें पढ़ रहा था, अब आसान चीज़ आ गई, समझ में नहीं आ रहा. एग्जाम में फ्रीज हो जाता है आपका दिमाग इस तरह के क्वेश्चन पे, ये याद रखना. ऑलराइट, बहुत आसान सा इन्फॉर्मेशन है. पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट में जाओगे तो गला सूखने लगता है, चेहरे के साथ आंखों के सामने अंधेरा छा जाता है. बहुत ही सिंपल क्वेश्चन पे भी. दिस इज ऑल ह्यूमन, सो बी अवेयर ऑफ दिस, so that when you face it you don't feel that कि कुछ abnormal हो रहा है. All right, and when you are preparing, you are prepared for it. This is one question. Let's go to the next question, the similar kind of question. Which of the following is geography closest to Great Nicobar? Sumatra, of course, and that's why later you will find Andaman Nicobar ASEH connectivity project. ASEH is nothing but a reference to a part of Sumatra island, provincial name. All right, and that the tip of Sumatra is the island of Sabang. सुना है आपने, right? Sabang Island, close to the Nicobar, where India is interested in building maritime infrastructure, right? So geography related questions most of the times are inspired by why is that place in news, because something is happening, because India may be involved. Mekong Ganga cooperation हमने पढ़ा. मेकॉन्ग गंगा पे एक सवाल पूछा है यूपीएससी ने, वो ये सवाल है. द मेकॉन्ग गंगा कोऑपरेशन एंड इनिशिएटिव ऑफ 6 कंट्रीज. यूपीएससी ने बता दिया 6 देश हैं इसमें, आपको याद करने की जरूरत नहीं है. ऑलराइट, तो ये भी आपको एक आंसर देता ना, कई चीज़ें तो यूपीएससी खुद बता देगा, राइट? तो क्या क्या याद करोगे, राइट? सो विच ऑन द फॉलोइंग इज आर नॉट पार्टिसिपेंट्स? क्या आंसर है? आंसर बहुत सिंपल है, चाइना, बांग्लादेश. ऑलराइट, Mekong Ganga initiative was launched in the year 2000 in the capital of Laos called Vientiane. Its primary purpose is to promote cooperation, various kinds of cooperation, initially cultural, between the people of these two civilizational rivers. It meets through ministerial conferences, and generally its focus right now is on promoting cooperation in culture, connectivity, but also trade, manufacturing, right? तो ये एक इनिशिएटिव जिसका इंडिया पार्ट है, और यूपीएससी ऐसे सवाल पूछता है, हु आर द मेंबर्स? सो द मेंबर्स आर इंडिया, बताओ, म्यांमार, थाईलैंड, आईटीप, सीएलएमवी. इंडिया, थाईलैंड, 2 large countries, कंबोडिया, लाओस, म्यांमार, वियतनाम, 4 of the least developed countries of Southeast Asia. चलें आगे, चलो अब आगे और देखते हैं. दिस इज दी मेकॉन्ग रिवर. आई हैव ऑलरेडी शोन यू दी मेकॉन्ग रिवर, राइट? सो दिस इज बेसिकली अगेन रिमाइंडिंग यू दैट in the name of Mekong Ganga cooperation there is Mekong, there is Ganga. That is the geography of it. And the international relations of it is 6 countries have come together and formed an initiative for cooperation in this matter, right? And that's why I showed you the map. Let's move forward and let's look at the next part which we are going to start. So again, let's do some bit of mapping. This is West Asia, just as we talked about Southeast Asia. It is an extended neighborhood of India. All right, extended neighborhood means neighbor of your neighbor. All right, neighbors are countries with whom you share land or maritime boundary. They are your neighbors. And then as you start moving away from your own land, what you will find is after the countries with whom you share a border are your extended neighbors. Right? So West Asia is another extended neighborhood of India. Now let's look at some of the features. See, India's interest in this region can be clearly distributed across three axes. One is relations with Iran. All right, it's important for its own reasons. Two, relations with Gulf countries. All right, these are the Gulf countries. Three, relations on the Mediterranean coast or relations with Israel. All right, these are the three prominent axes of India's interest in West Asia. Okay? And this region produces a lot of questions, just as Southeast Asia, location based questions. All right, last year also you would have found a question called Levant. ये Levant कहाँ है? ये सवाल पूछा था UPSC ने. So let's look at the geography. First, this is a maritime region, shares Indian Ocean with India. All right, this is Iran. Now if you look at Iran, pivotal country, borders with Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, this is Caspian Sea, this is Azerbaijan, this is Armenia, all right, and now this is Turkey. तो कई बार तो आपको इमेजिनेशन के लेवल पे ये भी याद नहीं होता कि ईरान जो है टर्की तक जाता है. ये केवल बार बार एटलस देखते रहोगे ना, इससे अपने आप याद हो जाएगा. ठीक है, तो एटलस के साथ टाइम पास किया करो. अगर टाइम पास करना ही है तो डू इट विथ द एटलस, राइट, बिकॉज one of the maximum return on investment is with this kind of a document, right? Interest bhi aata hai. Now come to the Gulf region. Now here is Persian Gulf, right, which the Arab countries call Gulf, simply Gulf or Arab Gulf, right? This is Gulf of Oman. If you move from Gulf of Oman towards Persian Gulf, you find a narrow passageway called Strait of Hormuz. So Strait of Hormuz is between Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. It is between them, it links them, right? Across the Strait of Hormuz, this is Iran, this at the tip is Oman, and this is UAE. So these are close by countries. Move forward. Some of the important countries are UAE, with whom we have good relations. Abu Dhabi is the capital. Qatar, Doha is the capital, known for Football World Cup. This is Bahrain. Manama is the capital. And then you go forward, Kuwait. Kuwait city is the capital. This is Saudi Arabia. Riyadh is the capital. Jeddah is an important Red Sea port. All right, this is Red Sea. So the one flank of Saudi Arabia is Red Sea, on the other flank is Persian Gulf. Rubal Khali Desert, because of its unique characteristic, you should remember Rubal Khali is in Saudi Arabia. All right, and now you have Yemen to the south of Saudi Arabia. All right, Yemen's capital is Sana'a, but its traditional capital has been Aden also, because it's an important port. This is the port of Aden. All right. Now around Saudi Arabia, if you see, this is Oman. Oman's capital is Muscat. All right, and this is Tropic of Cancer. Right. So the island of Socotra belongs to Yemen. All right, Socotra सुना होगा आपने नाम शायद, right? यहाँ पे होगा उसका लोकेशन जहाँ पे ये legend दिया हुआ है. This is Horn of Africa because of the horn-like structure, right? Now this is Gulf of Aden, Indian Ocean, largely. Now when you move across Gulf of Aden, you will cross Bab al-Mandeb Strait. This is another narrow critical access way, choke point. Bab al-Mandeb के across कौन दिखेगा आपको? Yemen, port of Aden, port of Djibouti, right? Here is Eritrea, which separated from Ethiopia in the 1990s. This is Somalia. Some part of it is also claimed as Somaliland, right? This is Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a landlocked country. All right, it does not have an open sea access. Right, Addis Ababa is the capital. It is also the headquarters of African Union. All right, move up. This is Sudan. Sudan now has separated into two countries. 2011, South Sudan became the capital. All right, now this is Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. Now you see here is the confluence of Blue Nile and White Nile. Right, so Nile's one origin is Ethiopian highland. Another origin, if you see the White Nile, you go to Uganda, to the lake systems which are there. So that's why UPSC would never ask about the origin of River Nile, right? Because tracing the origin of rivers is fairly complicated task, जो simple geography book में नहीं दिया होता है. So that's why UPSC does not ask you, but you generally have the knowledge, right? Now to the north of Sudan is Egypt, all right? You have dams like Aswan here. Significant archaeological sites around it also, Luxor, right? And then you have Cairo, the capital. This is the port of Alexandria in the Mediterranean. This is Port Said in the Mediterranean. This is Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. अब यहाँ पे देखो बाबल मांदेर से आए, right? Red Sea now is opening into two branches. One going in the northeasterly direction is Gulf of Aqaba. Here you have opening of Israel. The town of Eilat of Israel is here. Aqaba is a town itself in Jordan, and Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. Sharm el Sheikh में COP26 हुआ था. Sharm el Sheikh is a Red Sea resort. ये हर अखबार में छपा होगा. So if you should not be surprised if UPSC simply asks Sharm el Sheikh is located in. All right, COP27 पढ़ लिया, but that is basically how you connect, correlate with things. ठीक है, अब यहाँ से हम दूसरा जाते हैं जो नॉर्थ वेस्ट डायरेक्शन में. So this is the Suez Canal, a man-made critical access point. All right, Suez अक्सर न्यूज में रहता है, Suez traffic etc etc. Right, a lot of trade passes through. Egyptian president was in India, so current affairs of January also it was covered. And now you enter into Mediterranean, Red Sea, Mediterranean, right? This is the Levant, all right? Levant region. Why? Simply for purpose of simplicity to understand, this is the eastern margin of the Mediterranean, all right? And areas of Israel, areas of Lebanon, some areas of Syria, also in some conceptions areas around Jordan are considered to be a part of it. Fertile Crescent and Levant, ऐसा term हम use करते हैं. Middle East, Americans और Europeans use करते हैं to denote this area which we call West Asia, right? West of us, west in Asia, so West Asia, हमारे लिए common sense है. Middle East and North Africa, some parts of Africa are culturally similar or have cultural similarities with Arab countries. For example, Arabic as a spoken language, spoken in Saudi Arabia, but also in Egypt, Sudan, South Sudan, many of these countries. So this is called Middle East and North Africa, MENA. हम इसको कहते हैं वाना, West Asia and North Africa, right? तो इतना किसी भी मैप को देख के आपको पता चल जाएगा. अब यहीं पे आप देखो, आर्मीनिया, अजरबैजान के बीच में लड़ाई चल रही है on a region called Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh lies in Azerbaijan. It's a majority Armenian population. When the Soviet Union collapsed, as it happened, the residents wanted to join Armenia, but the region went with or was allocated to Azerbaijan. So there is a periodic conflict. It's a peculiar situation. It's a region in which the ethnic minority in the country is the majority, but it's geographically not contiguous with the country they want to join. Sometimes this also is the case, right? So ये इस रीजन को हम क्या कहते हैं? कॉकेसस, जॉर्जिया, आर्मीनिया, अजरबैजान, इस रीजन को हम कहते हैं कॉकेसस. किससे आइडेंटिफाई होता है? कॉकेसस माउंटेन रेंज. ऑलराइट, सो हम अब इसको फिर एथनिसिटी के रूप में भी यूज कर सकते हैं, कॉकेशियन, राइट? सो ये वो रीजन है. और इसके बाद चले जाओगे सेंट्रल एशिया, दिस इज सेंट्रल एशिया, राइट? कैस्पियन सी, विच आर द कंट्रीज ऑन द बैंक्स ऑफ कैस्पियन सी? कजाकिस्तान, तुर्कमेनिस्तान फ्रॉम Central Asia, Iran from West Asia, Azerbaijan, and this is Russia. So these are the countries surrounding the Caspian Sea. अब यहीं पे एक और रीजन है, ब्लैक सी. तो ब्लैक सी के लिए आगे चलते हैं. उससे पहले क्वेश्चन देख लो. ये क्वेश्चन था, द टर्म लेवांट ऑफ्टन हर्ड इन न्यूज roughly corresponds to which of the following regions? So as I said, region along the eastern Mediterranean shores. All right? तो यूपीएससी जब भी लोकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन पूछता है ना, तो बहुत ब्रॉड मार्जिन देता है आपको करेक्ट होने का. सो यू हैव टू वर्क हार्ड टू मार्क दीज क्वेश्चंस रॉन्ग और नॉट वर्क एट ऑल, है ना? या तो भगवान के भरोसे रहो या बहुत मेहनत करके गलत मार्क करके आओ. अदरवाइज यूपीएससी इज गिविंग यू अ लॉट ऑफ हिंट दैट दीज आर वेरी कॉमन सेंसिकल थिंग्स. Come out of the mythology of preparation of this examination. Treat it as a normal examination, but understand there is a lot of competition. So you have to organize well, you have to prepare well. है ना? दया वया की कोई गुंजाइश नहीं है इस एग्जाम में. You are not the first generation to write the civil service examination. You would not be the last. ये हमें क्लास 10th के बोर्ड में मेरे एक टीचर ने बताया था, तो मुझे बहुत अच्छी बात लगी थी ये. Because we always put things out of proportion. है ना? ये नहीं हुआ तो जीवन में क्या होगा. सबसे मुश्किल इस एग्जाम के प्रिपरेशन में ये है. सेकेंड डिफिकल्टी इज योर वैनिटी प्रोजेक्ट. थर्ड डिफिकल्टी इज योर इनेबिलिटी टू मैनेज टाइम. ऑल राइट, सो दैट्स वाई फोकस ऑन द प्रोसेस, डोंट काउंट द पेजेस. ये क्वेश्चन आया. आगे चलते हैं. OSCE नाम का एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन आया होगा, राइट? वाई एम आई एक्सपेंडिंग इट? बिकॉज डॉक्यूमेंट में एक्सपैंडेड नहीं था, राइट? So that's why I found it and I expanded it, right? ये OSCE क्या है? So you would often see OSCE comes into news in the context of Russia-Ukraine crisis also, when there are diplomatic efforts. It was in news in the context of Georgian conflict also. Georgia and Russia had fought a war in 2008, right? It is a body which created what is called the Minsk group. Minsk group is involved in diplomacy between Ukraine and Russia. कभी ध्यान दिया होगा ये सारे टर्म आते हैं. So उसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एक फंडामेंटल इंफॉर्मेशन जुड़ जाती है, विच इज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन फॉर सिक्योरिटी एंड कोऑपरेशन इन यूरोप, OSCE. पढ़ा होता तो एग्जैक्टली पता चल जाता किस पार्ट ऑफ कंटेंट की बात कर रहा हूं मैं, राइट? सो दिस इज वर्ल्ड्स लार्जेस्ट रीजनल सिक्योरिटी ओरिएंटेड इंटर गवर्नमेंटल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, मीनिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ नंबर ऑफ पार्टिसिपेंट्स, focusing on regional security. Regional security of which area? As the name suggests, Europe, larger Europe and also some part of Eurasia. What is its mandate? Its mandate includes issues such as arms control, promotion of human rights, freedom of the press, free and fair election, democratization, these kinds of issues. Meaning, when it comes to security, it has a fairly wide ambit of definition of issues. All right? It was formed in the year 1975 in Helsinki, Finland. Its structure we don't need to know because India is not part of it, but we know that it has 57 participating states and its regular meetings are at the level of permanent council where all 57 countries are represented through their representative. These meetings take place every week in Vienna. So that's why it is in news, because if something is happening, this body is also meeting regularly, right? When there is no conflict, you will not find mention of this body. But when there is a conflict in Europe, Russia-Ukraine conflict, you will see this body's name coming into picture because there is lot of diplomacy, back channel negotiations which go on in an attempt to contain a conflict. क्योंकि conflict is not controllable, it's like wildfire, है ना? पड़ोसी के घर में आग लगी है तो बुझाने की कोशिश करना, क्योंकि वो आग अगला आपके ही घर पे आने वाली है. So that's why collective security organizations or collective defense organizations are preferred by some countries. It is not like NATO, it's not an alliance. All right, so its main task is diplomacy. All right, so ये जब पढ़ोगे तो अपने आप समझ में आ जाएगा कि ये किस part of content से है. Right, so I showed you the map, I talked about these questions and I talked about this organization for a simple reason, because if you have not read your content, don't worry, I have read the content. All right, I would still say you read the content. Wherever there is a need, I am making the addition, because जब पढ़ोगे ना तो अपने आप कई चीज़ें सिंपल होगी, जो कुछ चीज़ें मैंने पढ़ के भी आपको यहाँ पे बताया. तो अगली क्लास में क्या करोगे? पढ़ के आना. आप इतने भी बिजी नहीं हो गए हैं कि अभी आपको और सब्जेक्ट्स पढ़ना है इसलिए आप ये नहीं पढ़ सकते. ये सिंपली यही दिखाता है कि योर प्रायोरिटीज आर रॉन्ग. When something is going on, उसको छोड़ के आप किसी और चीज़ को प्रायोरिटी बना लेते हो. This is what your brain does. When it has to face a very difficult task, what your brain would do is it would find a simple, distractible problem. क्योंकि एफर्ट नहीं लगाना तो दूसरी प्रॉब्लम ढूंढो, उसको सॉल्व करो. ऑल राइट, तो अपने दिमाग को भी समझो. जो नहीं पढ़ के आया, what they are doing is first of all, क्योंकि आप ही एक क्लास में हैं तो ऑनलाइन भी बहुत सारे लोग हैं. So you are controlling the pace of the class. If you read, if you have doubts, we are fast. Because और तब और भी क्या होगा, मैं एक चीज़ और भी बता देता हूँ. टेक्स्ट तो आपके पास है ही, तब मुझे और भी मौका मिलेगा वैल्यू एडिशन करने का. ऑल राइट, अगर आप पढ़ के आएंगे, अदरवाइज इट वुड बी अबाउट कंप्लीटिंग द डॉक्यूमेंट. चलिए, आई विल स्टॉप हियर. In the next class, of course, there would be questions from what? The coverage that we have done so far. Next topic that I will open up with is India, Russia. All right? वहाँ से मैं ओपन करूँगा नेक्स्ट क्लास में. इसका मतलब ये है कि आपको वो पूरा पढ़ के आना है और वहीं तक पढ़ के नहीं रुकना. जितना आगे तक पढ़ के आओगे उतना आगे तक कवरेज हो पाएगा. प्लीज टेक केयर ऑफ दिस एंड थैंक यू. दैट वुड बी ऑल. क्योंकि चौथी क्लास में मैं कह दूंगा कि भाई कंटेंट हैज बीन कवर्ड. ऑल राइट, यही मुझे कहना चौथी क्लास में. पांचवी क्लास नहीं लेने जा रहा, तो IAS बहुत ज़्यादा क्वेश्चन आते नहीं, तो इसलिए खुद पढ़ के आओगे तो इस क्लास का डबल यूज कर पाओगे. इफ यू रीड, द क्लास वुड बी मोर बेनिफिशियल.